Good evening and welcome to the school committee meeting of Thursday, January 11th, 2018. We are going to go into executive session right at the beginning of the meeting. It's scheduled to last for 20 minutes. I'm going to end it at 6:50 p.m. on the dot. So I'd like a motion now to go into executive session. The motion is to conduct strategy sessions in preparation for negotiations with union and or non-union personnel or contract negotiations with union and or non-union in which, if held in an open meeting, may have a detrimental effect, to conduct strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation in which, if held in an open meeting, may have a detrimental effect. Collective bargaining may also be conducted to discuss security and safety. Roll call.
Yes. Who made the motion?
The motion.
Second? Okay, go ahead.
Yes.
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 Yes. Yes. We're now in executive session, and we will return for the regular meeting. All right, so we are back in regular session. We are right on time. It is 6:50 p.m., and the first thing on the agenda is public participation. For those of you who haven't done this before, you come up, you get 3 minutes to talk. We don't respond. So it feels weird sometimes, but those are the rules. Okay? So, Liz Exton, you're first.
Hi, my name is Liz Exton. I still live on Washington Street. I am here tonight with a group of parents who represent a much larger group of parents who are asking you to fund full-time kindergarten TAs in all kindergarten classrooms in Arlington. A number of other people are going to speak tonight, and then there are some people who are just here to show their support for this issue. There is also an open house at Pierce tonight, so a number of people who wanted to be here couldn't make it. All of us here believe that kindergarten students should be set up for academic and social emotional success. Teaching assistants are essential to high-quality kindergarten classrooms. They support student learning, enrich curriculum, provide behavioral support, and ensure the safety of all students. Kindergarten TAs are an asset to classroom instruction and student learning. They support teachers by collecting data, differentiating instruction, providing one-on-one support, and modifying activities to ensure that every child can access the curriculum successfully. Because they are available to support individual students with social conflicts, emotional challenges, and other unique needs of young children, the teacher can continue instruction for the class. By funding full-time kindergarten TAs, the district could be saving money in the long run. As Arlington faces an increase in enrollment and an increase in high-needs students, it is more important than ever to fund full-time teaching assistants in all kindergarten classrooms in Arlington. One teacher cannot effectively meet the diverse needs of upwards of 20 kindergarten students, and full-time kindergarten teaching assistants will allow teachers to better support all students. We must prioritize funding for our youngest students. The investment and support we put into kindergarten will have long-term financial benefits. Having full-time, well-trained kindergarten teaching assistants should be a priority for this district. Their value to our classrooms and students cannot be overemphasized. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Liz. The next speaker is Chris Fitzgerald.
Yep. Hello, everyone. Thank you for having us. So I'm Chris Fitzgerald. I live here in Arlington. I have 2 young kids that are going to be going into the Thompson School in the coming years. I want to echo everything that Liz just said. She organized us to come. For me, the biggest thing, in addition to the educational experience for the kids and the benefit that they'll have with the extra assistant, is the safety element. I see in the preschool age how important. My son is in preschool now and is 12, and they have 2 teachers, and just the interaction with the kids. If a kid has a problem and has to, be removed from the class because, it's a difficult time in his life and he's struggling with whatever reason, to then not have that ability to take that kid outside the classroom and calm him down or, work with him, I think is important to have that. And so for me, the safety element is one of the bigger issues, in addition to the educational experience at that age. So I'm not going to use my entire 3 minutes, so thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chris. Ben Clark.
Hi, I'm Ben Clark. Thank you for having us here. And I agree really with all of what's been said by both the speakers so far. I also have a child who's in kindergarten now. He's 5, so he'll be, I'm sorry, not kindergarten, excuse me, preschool. He'll be going into kindergarten. He is 5, so he'll be old even when he's going into kindergarten because he has a September birthday. But even with him still being in preschool this year, I'm looking at the preschool environment and really appreciating that there are always multiple adults in the room to deal with situations where he does need a little bit more support. And I see, even just when I'm picking him up or dropping him off, when, there's some kids who need more support, and I don't really understand what's going to change about that within 1 year, especially, looking at him being on the older end for preschool, probably being on the older end going into kindergarten, and thinking about kids who might be on the younger end, how that would work for them. I'm really just found out about this recently, but I'm pretty concerned. I just assumed there would be 2 adults in the room at all times, as is the case for preschool, and I really don't understand what that 1 year makes a big enough difference to kids for that not to be the case. It doesn't seem like a good idea to me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you coming. Julie Goldberg-Ziger? Ziger, did I pronounce it right? Ziger, okay.
Hi, I'm Julie Goldberg-Ziger. I'm also a parent of 2 young children. My older one will be in Bishop Kindergarten next year. She is on the young end. She has a July birthday, so she will have just barely turned 5. So this is a recently 4-year-old who is used to being in a classroom in her pre-K class with 3 teachers to 16 adults thrown into an environment. I am really scared for what that's going to look like. These are children who are new to the school district, and so any social and emotional needs that they may have not yet been flagged. I think that it's a critical formative year, and we can talk about all the other needs of all the other students, but I think these youngest ones, really, this is setting the foundation for their entire academic experience. So I think that their self-image as students develops in that first year, and they need as much support as possible for that, not to mention the safety concerns. So I just wanted to lend my voice as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Alam Sadat?
Hi, I'm Alham Sadat, also a future parent of 3 future Hardy kindergartners, and I'd like to agree with a lot of the things that have been previously mentioned. Also add in, on top of educational, emotional, and safety issues of having 1 teacher per classroom for children as young as 5 and 6 years old. In the case of things that occur quite often with young children, such as somebody has an accident in terms of not getting to the bathroom on time, if you have 1 teacher in that classroom who needs to take care of that child and physically help them get clean clothes and things like that, who's taking care of the other 18 to 20 children in the classroom? I think these are really young children, and once again, reiterating the point about the numbers that they're used to coming out of preschool the previous year, which is my children are currently in preschool classrooms of 20 with 4 teachers in each classroom. So just reiterating that the numbers, that there's an inadequacy in terms of actually being able to provide adequate care, teaching, emotional support for young children this young, in a setting with 20 children and 1 teacher alone. Thank you.
Thank you. Jason Martyr? Martyr, okay, I can read that. Okay, thank you.
So my name is Jason Martyr. I have twin boys who are 5, and they will be entering their kindergarten year at Bishop School this fall. I'm here to urge the committee to Seriously consider increasing the budget for full-time teachers' aides to work in the classrooms with teachers so that all students in the kindergarten years can have the benefit of getting the attention they deserve as they enter into this period in their life. That attention, as far as I can see, is crucial to these kids as they begin their educational journey. Not only to identify the strengths that they have in the classroom, but also the weaknesses. I hate to use that word, but if we don't address things that are lacking at that age and they continue to progress, where does that leave these kids as they continue to progress through our school system? It's my strong belief that issues identified and addressed early on have a greater chance of being resolved as kids grow and prevent all these things from becoming serious problems, which in turn become our problems as a community. It's my understanding that classroom ratios today in Arlington can be as high as 20-1. My family moved to Arlington about 2.5 years ago from Boston, and I will fully admit that we moved because we did not want our kids to be part of the Boston school system. We did not want to face the problems that exist as being part of that school system. We did not want to have to deal with the lottery system there. We did not want to have to take a risk, and we could not afford to send our kids to private school. That's why we moved to Arlington. That's one of the main reasons, I should say. It's not every reason. But these ratios, unless addressed, will clearly have an adverse effect on the quality of education of the students here in Arlington, on my kids, all of our kids. And that adverse effect will have an adverse effect on our community. It will clearly put a stress on teachers, and that stress will have an adverse effect on their performance in the school, in the classroom. The domino effect that creates could have terrible effects that can easily be imagined. Larger and larger ratios of students to teachers that cause quality of education to degrade. Arlington becomes a less attractive place for people to settle, and students suffer without access to the best teachers. And as I said, Arlington becomes a less desirable place to live. With greater support, our teachers will be able to manage their classrooms better, provide the attention that the students need, and the school system will be a more desirable place for them to work, and Arlington will be a place that can continue to grow. So again, I urge the committee to seriously consider increasing the budget to allow for more full-time teachers' aides to be in the kindergarten classrooms with these kids and give them the best chance at success. Thank you.
Thank you. Lauren Olaf Sonacher?
Sonacher.
Okay. Yeah.
So I'm Lauren Sinalker, and I live on Hawthorne Ave. I have 2 children, one of whom is going to be in kindergarten at Brackett starting in 2019, and I'm also a 5th grade teacher in the Lincoln Public Schools. And I'm here tonight, as is everyone else, to advocate for full-time teaching assistants in all kindergarten classrooms in Arlington. Research has shown us time and time again that it's good practice for successful teaching and learning in kindergarten to have classrooms of no more than 18 to 20 students. And we're also well aware of the increasing enrollment in our town and the lack of space to house additional classrooms in order to maintain small class sizes. So as a result, we're in a quandary, right? How do we create a kindergarten experience that's in the best interest of our children given these larger class sizes? Simply put, smaller ratios. Having a full-time assistant in every kindergarten classroom across the district is imperative for setting our kindergartners up for success, both in their first year of school and for many years down the road. It's well understood that kindergarten students need more attention. They're adjusting to a new environment with different expectations, including an increasing focus on skill development, foundational skills in math and reading and science. It's an incredibly important time for children. In addition, they arrive with a diversity of skills as a result of their preschool experiences. In fact, 15 to 20% of them are going to be identified with special needs over the course of the first several years of school. And in order to more effectively meet the needs of all learners, we must provide additional instructional support consistently throughout the day. As a teacher, I'm well aware of the impact of having additional instructional support. Beyond classroom management, this additional support allows us to better differentiate instruction and allow children the opportunity to flourish in a learning environment better suited to their individual needs. In math, it means that we can teach a game to one small group while supporting another with a hands-on center activity. In literacy, It allows us to conference one-on-one with a child, knowing others are more likely to have their needs met. Children will only experience kindergarten once in their lives. This is not the time to provide a less effective kindergarten experience because of our enrollment challenges and space constraints. Overlooking the appointment of full-time assistants in kindergarten sets the stage for more problems later on. And this is why I urge you to prioritize funding for this need and fund full-time kindergarten TAs across Arlington.
Thank you very much. Ruth Armida?
Hi, my name is Ruth Hermida. I have 2 young children that are coming into the Arlington Public Schools. They're young right now. I have a 2-year-old or 2.5-year-old and a 1-year-old, so they're young. But I am concerned about what's going to happen in the future for my kids, and I came into Arlington as knowing that this was going to be a great school for them, especially for the younger schools, but I am concerned about the numbers and, these ratios are a little concerning for me. And I'm here to support everybody here, and I reiterate everything that, all these people have been saying has been very valid points, and I just wanted to give my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. That concludes public participation. I don't think I missed anyone. Did I miss anyone? Okay. So next we bring up Melissa Dugalecki, who will talk to us about an athletic fee proposal. Come on up, Melissa. Melissa is our athletic director.
Hi, how are you? Well, thank you for having me and offering the opportunity to start and foster this conversation. Do we know if you got it? Thank you. In my 5th year now, we've spent a lot of time in the past few years really evaluating practices and organizational structures and getting a handle on, the runnings of the department. It's been a really, exciting and collaborative effort. And one of the places that we find ourselves at now, thank you, is assessing our user fees, which is an integral part of our resources, and maintaining the consistency in our vision and our philosophy. I know that this is the very preliminary first step to bring to you all, and it would be a rightfully so long collaborative process, and it would be imperative to have multiple forums and avenues for public participation and feedback, collaborative efforts, and assessments. But when we are looking at our user fees, there are really 2 primary lenses from which I would view this from, and it would be philosophical and then practical logistical. So philosophically, I just put the rationale up here for you, which essentially says, I'll shorten it for you all, but essentially says that the purpose and intent of our educational athletic programming is to foster an experience that is steady and consistent, no matter what level or what sport you're playing. So they're not purchasing necessarily, a specific sport experience or developing those sport skills. We're providing them with the opportunity to develop life skills that are going to help them far beyond their time here. Research indicates that that's, the core and the fundamental value of athletic experiences, and that's what we really strive to instill. Additionally, the user fee is one of the, I think, misperceptions perhaps, is that it fully covers the cost of our programming. And truly, it just defers the cost. So from a practicality standpoint, in addition to philosophical, looking at the fact that no sport is covering all of their costs, and then so many of the costs are uncontrollable. And is it right or fair to tier them in a way that, maybe holds one sport more accountable fiscally because their league start times for a game is at 4 o'clock and they can't take the town buses? We have to pay significantly more for a private bus company. Is that, something that, should really be encumbered by the students when it's really a logistical part on our end? Additionally, other examples of that is a uniform rotation. No one pays more or less if their team's up for uniforms, which we've instilled, so it's every 4 or 5 years. Tournament, The state sets the fees for officials, and those vary as well. The state also sets the regulations around the maximum number of events we can have. So these are all regulations that significantly impact cost, but from a practicality standpoint, it makes it nearly impossible to pinpoint an exact number for any sport because of the amount of uncontrollable variables. This is our philosophy as noted on our website. It's just that we are striving to enhance their growth throughout their careers, teaching lessons that are going to translate from life, from the playing field to life, whether it's building resiliency, overcoming adversity, teamwork, communication, time management, all these skills that are going to serve them in their relationships and their professions, whatever it may be, beyond here. Our goals, so developing these skills and using educational athletics to unite the community. And just the last slide here just shows the athletic fees in the league. So as you can see, other districts have gravitated towards more of a universal fee, which I think speaks to kind of the practicality and philosophical components. So you can see Winchester, Reading, and Lexington are all at a $325 flat fee. In both Lexington and Winchester, they have eliminated gate fees as well, which I think is important to consider when we're looking at all avenues of collecting revenue. Belmont is not tiered by sport. They are tiered by number of seasons, which I think also reflects their values. So if you play one sport, it's $450. Your second sport is $300, no matter what you play. And if you are a three-sport athlete, which is something we strive to promote, it's $150. So they reduce the cost based on the increased participation. And then Woburn, they're tax-based in structure. They don't have to worry about athletic fees. And then as you can see, we are tiered by sport. So I've done some preliminary assessments with John and looking at it, and what we're looking to assess is a structure that would be revenue neutral. So it wouldn't be looking to raise revenue, really just striving to assess, is the way that we're valuing our programming reflective of the way that we value our programming and what we're trying to offer? And is it even really tangible to do it to that minute detail, given all the practicality and different logistical components of it? So that's, the introductory part of the conversation, and I'll leave it up to you for any questions.
Bill?
I don't know whether it's for you or the superintendent. Is the recommendation tonight, or is this something that will happen in the future?
I think that we would have a recommendation that we could talk about tonight.
Sure.
Ultimately, I think this will go back to the budget subcommittee to work on the details for a final.
So we wouldn't be voting tonight, is what I'm saying?
No.
Fine.
This takes
Okay.
a little bit of a process.
Right.
But to your question, I think it's a great question. If we are going to do this, we probably should do it in the next month or two so that there's plenty of notice for next year.
And I guess if it goes to a subcommittee, I just ask that we, notification for other stakeholders to come and talk to us at the same time.
Absolutely. Yes.
Thank you.
Yep.
Jennifer and then Paul.
So that's actually my question. What outreach have you done to the community already, or what are you planning to do?
Sure.
Change, even if it's for the best, is always an anxiety-producing
I
process
absolutely-
for people, so it's just always good to be able to hear their perspectives.
No, I fully recognize and appreciate that. Change definitely induces anxiety regardless of the situation. Preliminary conversations have really been with Dr. Bodie, John. I have a parent vision team where it's parent volunteers who I speak with about different ideas and priorities, so really talking with them. And what's nice about that is there's a representation from almost all of our sports or different seasons. I have a coaches advisory with whom I work to get the coaches' perspective. Again, that's different sport representation. And even as much as the Captain's Council, we've had some preliminary discussions. The feedback's been positive thus far. Obviously, there are a lot of differing opinions, and it's important to fully and thoroughly investigate all the different angles in assessing that. And so after those kind of preliminary conversations and assessments of is this, something that we'd like to continue to look at? Our next step was to bring it here, and if it moves forward, to discuss how we would provide avenues for community members to participate.
So it
Paul,
might be, I'm
oh,
sorry.
sorry.
So it just might be valuable to send maybe a survey out to your parent community to sort of solicit feedback on any concerns or questions they might have.
Absolutely.
Be helpful, yeah.
Thank you.
Paul, then.
Okay, so we're now on television, and there's this vast audience out there watching
Okay.
us. You've now laid out the case that what we do is very different than other towns.
Sure.
You've also stated that what you want to do would be revenue neutral, though there would be some people end up paying more, some people end up paying less. What proposals have you entertained, and what sort of reactions have you gotten from people that you've shared that with? And if you could also tell me how much into the community of parents and families this conversation has gotten to at this point.
So the conversation has not spread further than the different groups that I meet with at a preliminary level, as a more conversational, getting their feedback, here's the philosophy behind it, and here's the next step. So it's been, smaller groups with diverse representation. I've had feedback in both directions. I've had some say that they would appreciate having this approach and philosophy because it almost creates a hierarchy or a feeling of maybe more entitlement to certain things or resources based on having a larger fee, or maybe less, rights or privileges towards something because, or their sport isn't quite as important because it only costs, X amount. So that was feedback that I was truthfully a little bit surprised to receive, and it was an important consideration. I've had feedback, of course, about the fear of covering the costs as almost as if one sport is covering the cost of another. And that's where I think it's really important to educate on, and this is something that we've spent a lot of time diving into, that our user fees really only cover like a smaller percentage, not even half of our operating budget. And there's a number of scholarships, and there's just a lot of, things that go in behind the scenes that aren't necessarily considered, in the initial kind of assessment of it, I think from an outside perspective. When I've had those conversations and really fostered an understanding and talked about our philosophy and what's consistent with that, the feedback has been positive, but certainly there is understandably concern of, well, will we be paying for so-and-so's experience? And in the reality, in our assessments, that would not be the case.
And so what sort of structure are you modeling in terms of thinking about that you'd like us to consider?
Well, so far, we've just been, at a very kind of preliminary stage, looking at a few different models. One includes a universal fee, similar to Winchester, Reading, and Lexington. One model includes more of what Winchester and Lexington does, which eliminates the gate fees. And if possible, I think it's very important to consider that, because if we truly want our educational athletics to be a platform to unite the community, I think it's really important to make it fully accessible, for students, for parents, for alumni, to just feel welcoming and just be able to come and enjoy, even part of an event. And then a third model we're looking at is a less tiered, but maybe a two-tier system. So those are what we've looked at so far. But again, it's really preliminary right now.
Chrissy.
So I want to provide a little historical perspective on how we got to the fees
Sure.
that we did. And this is remembering now in distant years. We were trying to, it was during a time when we had significant budget crunches. We were trying to maintain our athletic program instead of cutting costs by eliminating sports, which was happening across the state. But at the same time, we didn't have extra money. In fact, we were really low. And we increased the fees looking at we didn't look at the overhead type costs, like the cost of the athletic director and some others. We looked more at the specific sport fees, how many kids were in the sport, and then, basically did a division, knowing that the fees were not asking students to pay the entire cost at all, in part because of the overhead type costs and also just the nature of the math. There was also an athletic advisory council, which was convened and held meetings over about a year, that talked about how fees should be structured, whether they should be single fee or tiered, and had multiple public forums and got lots of input. And basically, they spit back the fee assessment that you see here.
Yep.
It was felt to be more fair. And so we've basically continued with that. And this is now, when were we doing this, like 2008, 9, 10, something?
Oh, it was on the committee.
Then 8?
It was between 2007 and 2012.
Okay, yeah.
I wasn't here.
Yeah,
Either Obama or
Okay.
Bush was president.
yeah, something, okay.
We're blaming Obama.
So what I'm saying is that this was not done willy-nilly. This was not done without a lot of thought. Yeah. And that there was a lot of community input that drove us there. Now, I don't think there was a strong presence from the administration putting out the points that you're making, which I think are good points. And, all of this is going to be a balancing of what is the best option for our town and what makes the most sense for our students. And so I'm not saying it's unreasonable to reevaluate and reconsider, but just that this is the talk that happened before, and this is how we ended up where we are. The other thing I want to note is that since that time, we have actually, the fees have not gone up in proportion to the costs that we're seeing. So we've kept that amount constant for many years, and the actual costs have been going up. So we're effectively been giving people sort of a reduction in things. I know it doesn't look like it when you look at those numbers,
but I understand, yeah.
We're collecting less than we expected when we initially set up the fees. So that's more not for you, but for our many viewers outside.
Sure.
I think that's, yeah. Oh, and I guess the other thing is just the amount of community input before was big, and I'm not saying budget shouldn't be involved, but I'm questioning budget running this whole, if we're going there, I'm questioning budget doing this whole thing. We do the math, but I'm thinking this is a bigger picture thing.
Len?
Thanks. So just a little bit more background, because Melissa did come to the budget subcommittee first to broach this subject. So when we advised her to come to the full committee because it was such a big deal, sort of take our temperature and see if this is a conversation we want to open. If it's a conversation we want to open and there seems to be willingness to do so, then either community relations or budget or working together with Melissa need to figure out how do we get robust community input. There seems to me to be basically 4 options on the table, your 3 plus status quo.
Yep.
We could do a survey about that. We could have, again, a community forum. We could set up a committee if we need to, but I'm not sure. But sort of the first step was coming here, saying this was her desire. She doesn't really like the way the system is now. What do we, are we open to proceeding with a change?
Yeah, so let me just give a thought. I think, if I recall correctly, in the past, it was either the athletic advisory committee or it was a fee committee. It was a special group that did the survey. So it wasn't the school committee who did all the surveying. And so that was my thinking, that would be sort of driven by a group within the athletic department. But if to answer your question, when this is on the agenda, that was my thinking. But we don't have to do it that way. Is there a structure in place? I guess my question for you, Melissa, is there a structure in place to get input from parents and others who may be interested in this issue?
So if the committee feels as though they want to move forward with this, I would work with, John and Dr. Bodie in terms of, I think it would be important to have electronic communication.
Yeah.
And then also in-person opportunities, whether it's a couple of open forums or meetings, to give everyone, regardless of their schedules, the ability to have input. I think it's really important. I think it should be a collaborative process. I mean, this impacts many stakeholders and different, ages and levels, and I do think it's important to do so.
So I would suggest that you and John and Dr. Bodie meet, and then somebody come back to us and just say, look, this is our suggestion. Either we have a subcommittee, the school committee, the community relations subcommittee drive this, but it's, it's not really our expertise, I don't think. Or we've got this group, your group is going to do an online survey with all parents who might be impacted and others who care about the issue, and you're going to survey them about the 4 different options that Len laid out and get their feedback, and then come back to us and say, this is what the people are thinking.
So almost like as if we together go out and do the research, really crunch the numbers in the proposal, and come back with the results of that.
That's,
sounds
I think, that's been our experience in the past, and it works better because you guys have the expertise.
Yeah.
You have the contact with all the parents
Right.
and all the people. You have their emails and information. That's, I think, a more effective way to do it, unless you want to do it, Jennifer.
No, actually, what I was going to say is, it's often hard to predict whether something is going to become a big issue or not, and because it was a big issue in the past doesn't necessarily mean
That's
it's going to be a
correct.
big issue. So I would suggest that the first effort right now is to do that sort of electronic survey, see if there is worry and fear. I mean, if it's big enough, then you have to do a lot more steps, But if it's small, you can proceed differently. So I think
Okay.
it's,
So why don't we
gathering
leave it at
information
that?
is helpful.
Sure.
Yeah, Bill.
Those people that are getting together, just want you to be cognizant of the Emerson decision with fees coming forward. John, that caused a brouhaha before. I'm sure you will, and thank you.
And I just want to say, too, I certainly appreciate and understand and value all the work and efforts that went into the original structure. I think it makes a lot of sense. And I do think the expansion of whether it's our turf maintenance plan or the track being redone and all these different things that you alluded to that you guys have supported to grow the athletic programming, it's important in, my role to kind of take a step back, like, when the kids watch film after a game and see what do we do well, what can we do better, continually trying to do that. And that's really all this derives from. But I completely understand and appreciate, the root of the current structure.
Okay, great. I just wanted to say, although I think it's fine for the athletic department to be working on this, I think there should be some sort of school committee involvement, either loop in, either a member of school committee helps on the group that drives us forward, or it be done with community relations in conjunction or something. I think it ends up being something that we're responsible for. I'm not saying we have to drive it, but I think we should be watching and helping.
So I think the community
If
relations
a lot can
subcommittee can
run.
have a meeting to hear what the process is and give feedback to it. But I think the process should be designed by the athletic folks. That's,
Do we
and
have
then-
a community relations? Sure.
no,
I don't think we do.
that's my thought. I mean, I could be,
I actually would worry about the timing, so we don't actually have a community relations coming up right soon. I'm not sure that this is enough for a full meeting necessarily.
okay.
That's what my.
Why don't you put together the plan, and
Sure.
we can keep everybody posted, and then we'll figure out a subcommittee, and our group should meet with you.
Great.
All right?
I can absolutely do that. All right. Thank you for your time.
All right, thank you so much for coming in. Very good. Next, Rod McNeil is going to give so if Jennifer Seuss at the last meeting reminded us that we were supposed to give a presentation on the process by which we are developing Goal 1.1, the vision of students as learners, and Rod is going to give us an update on that.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you. So at our last school committee meeting, Jennifer wanted to have an update, requesting an update on the plan for actually reviewing the goals for goal 1.1. And if you look at the process, if you look at the actual district goals, so you have it there on the agenda. Yeah, it's in the agenda. No, it's okay. Thank you for helping. That was a little small. Okay, so if you look under goal 1.1 and under the heading of evidence of success, it reads, a broad-based process will be developed to review, understand, and adopt the vision of students as learners and global citizens to be reviewed by the school committee by October 2017. Needless to say, we did not do that in the fall. However, we have developed a plan, and I've collaborated with the curriculum leaders as well as Dr. Bodie, and that would be the reference page that you see in the agenda. And the plan is to vet the process, or actually the vision statements of students as learners and global citizens, to different stakeholder groups within the community. And that plan is laid out right there as part of the reference. So as you can see, we have our curriculum leaders will speak with their departments, classroom teachers during their departmental meetings. Elementary teachers will vet the process with their building principals at the building level. And we've discussed it, and I've already sent it out to building principals, giving them the choice of doing this during early release, during a building meeting, faculty meeting, and also vetting it and getting parent feedback on it through the school councils at each one of the building. And then, as it reads, community groups as identified by the superintendent. And then, once we get the feedback from those different groups, we'll make different, various adjustments to the plan based upon those feedback. And then a final draft will be presented to the school committee at your last meeting in April. And then we'll get, and also, be open to your final vote or approval of the plan or the statements as vision of student as learner and vision of student as citizen. So getting your final approval voted by the last meeting in June. So at this time, I believe I'm giving it back to the school committee to look at the plan, look at the vision of student as learner and vision of student as citizen, and get your feedback on that plan, reviewed by the plan.
What I think might, certainly you can look at it and give us some suggestions, but we have a draft here. It was a draft created at the end of last year. The expectation is it'll probably be, as it goes through this process, and it already has begun to go through this process.
Yes.
It may be a little bit different. Doesn't mean you can't give us our comments, but the idea would be to give you the next draft, the consolidated draft in April for then more review. Now, that may go to a subcommittee at that point. I don't know, but I know one time that this is also going to be reviewed, it's just in multiple places, will be with the visioning group that we will have for the high school. So please, if you have any comments, just send them to us or tell us, and we're happy to add these to the ideas.
And just to give you, I already, I met with, actually I went to the Brackett School Council meeting yesterday, and I presented the visioning statements to their school council, and it was a lot of positive feedback around the various bullets that we have under there that defined the vision of student as learner and vision of student as citizen.
Jennifer?
So I'm getting a sense, and I may be wrong, so I just wanted to check in with, that we might be a little farther away from the process than we had originally anticipated now, that we're a little, no? Are we?
Still meets the timeline, it was April.
Oh, okay, so actually, so the question is, so it looks like in our goals, we weren't necessarily looking for the result, in October, but more the plan. So, but it sounds in the description that this plan has just begun, and the idea is to work over the next few months in terms of seeking input from teachers, administrators, and so forth. Is that? I might be getting this wrong. That's why I'm asking the question. Is that what the plan is right now? To sort of begin the process around now, or?
Well, it's been in the works to talk about how we were going to do it. There's been some, not as widespread as it's going to be over the next couple of months. There was some more, another relook at it in the fall at the curriculum leader level. So I think it's ready, everybody feels very confident it's ready to go out for more review at this point. I guess essentially the answer to your question is yes, in terms of the different groups that are looking at it.
Yes, that's a little slower getting off the ground than we wanted.
It's a little slower getting off the
I'm not saying,
ground.
this happens. I just sort of just get a sense of where we are. Yeah, okay.
Bill, then Cindy. And then one of the bullets, it says for the April 30th, the development and priority list of curriculum materials. Is that within our budget?
Actually, that is under process right now of what the materials will be for this budget. We can talk about where the money would come from.
I'm just concerned that the money may drive the materials that are needed, that may drive the vision.
No.
We have sufficient funds to not have that negative effect.
I would, well.
I don't mean to hold, it's not black and white. You're comfortable with the money that we have so that it should not deter programs?
It should not deter programs. Will the rollout be perhaps as fast as we would like? Maybe not. But we, John Denizio and I have looked at where we could source getting the materials.
Great. Thank you.
That was Cindy, then Len. Cindy,
Okay,
go ahead.
so I want to understand, so the goal says that we are going to have power standards, we're going to identify key transferable skills, we're going to have an inventory of personalized educational experiences, and this priority list of curriculum materials by April. Is that, we're still going to get all of that by April?
Yes.
Okay, all right,
Yes.
that's what I didn't understand, okay, because it just seemed like we were just doing the vision. And then when is this to be implemented? So this is the planning, and we're going to get the plan in April. So when is it meant to be implemented? Is it this school year or next school year?
When you talk about plans, you mean, I'm not sure what you mean. Could you be a little bit clearer to me on that
So
one?
these plans, the power standards.
Oh, yeah,
The
okay.
identification of key, so once we have this, when are we going to then do those? Is it
Yes.
this calendar year or next
No,
calendar?
it would not be this calendar year, it would be next calendar
So
year.
it's for 18-19.
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah,
all right, that's what I
correct.
was trying to figure out. So that's, my other question then, I guess, is, part of this should also be that we would also like to know a plan for how we are going to implement this vision, not just, so these are all the pieces that we need to implement it, but then it would also be good to have a timeline of how it would be implemented, which is not listed here in the goal,
Right, so maybe that could be one of our district goals next year.
is to have the timeline by which we are going to implement
And to
this.
what level we can implement it to.
Okay.
Len?
Thanks. So Cindy asked my question, but I just want to reiterate. So if we don't have the vision, how are we going to develop the power standards, the key transferable skills, those four things, if we don't have the vision yet?
We
I
have
don't think
this
that they're
vision.
entirely that linear. For example, power standards really are looking at what are the key concepts. You could include power standards, but generally they don't include it, the process or transferable skills necessarily. But I think that what all of our teachers, particularly at the elementary, would like to know is what are the key concepts that all students should master by the end of the year. And one of the criticisms that even was the beginning, the Common Core, was trying to take a look at what we're doing educationally in this country, in this state, and you had so many different standards, so many different goals, educational goals in each discipline. And there's been a refinement of that, but even with that refinement, there's still a lot. And the curriculum leaders are trying to identify what are the very most important things that we should, that become sort of the guiding light, so to speak, in our curriculum. Doesn't mean other things won't be taught. It's really where the emphasis is.
Any more questions? All right. All right, thank you, Rod. Okay. Next, we are going to hear from the Vision 2020 Task Force. Scott Lever is going to make a presentation, and John is going to cue that up. Someone's going to cue that up?
Keep hitting right back.
Okay. So before we hear from Scott, I just want to set the context. The Vision 2020 Task Force, Vision 2020 Education Task Force, as you know, has done over the years a lot of different things in the area of education, advocating for different programming in the school district. They've done surveys, and they're now going to present to us an idea of creating a goal for next year for a vision statement for the district. So to put things in context, we have a policy BDFA-E-2, district-wide goal setting and performance objective process. And by May 15th of each year, we're required, we receive goals from the superintendent of schools. We have to approve it by June 30th, and those goals for the following year are in place from July 1 to June 30. So we're not there yet. We're not approving any goals tonight. We're just getting some input. If you recall, there was a group last year that lobbied the school district in May about cultural competence, and so this is happening earlier rather than later. All right, Scott, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Jeff. Mr. Chairman.
I never get called that, but okay.
Well, yeah, thank you.
Other chairmen have been called that, by the way. That never happens to me.
Esteemed
Ever.
Mr. Chairman. I'm going to have the other folks here introduce themselves. There's also a couple other members of our group in the audience as well. Charlie, do you want to just...
Good evening, everybody. I'm Charlie Tillman. I'm a parent of a couple of girls at the Bracken Elementary School and work for an education foundation.
Hi, Rebecca Wolf-Lane, and I have a child in third grade in Thompson and a kindergartner, and I work for an organization called Jobs for the Future, which spans secondary and workforce and community college across the country.
I'm Pat Hanlon. I'm a town meeting member from Precinct 5, and I'm the associate member of the Board of Zoning Appeals, which you will see becomes relevant later. But actually, I'm just a grandfather who has some grandchildren whom I hope very much will be moving into our school district and have a stake in what you all are going to be deciding on these issues.
Thank you. So I wanted to I guess, start this by saying that I was at the meeting last night, and just to reflect on that, I thought it was an excellent meeting, and I wanted to express my thanks to both the administration and the school committee for organizing and running that meeting last night. I was left with a couple of feelings coming out of that session I just want to share, which I think are relevant as we start this discussion. First, there's clearly a sense that we're all in it together in that meeting, and I think that was a really important characteristic and a really important thing to come away from the meeting with. Second, I had also the sense that there'll be a lot of collaboration and that this is something very important and that we're working on something that is going to be lasting. And I think what we want to talk about is a vision and a strategic plan for the district that builds on that idea and really is an extension of what we talked about last night and an extension of the process that's been defined for the high school, and also really related to the discussion we just had about student as learner. I guess I'll do it here. So just to start with a quick quote, right? So we're here to talk tonight about the need that we perceive to have a vision and a district-wide strategic plan for education in Arlington. And the thing I liked about this quote was the idea that there's really two important ingredients for greatness. One is the plan, and second is urgent action. And we believe that you need the plan first to help create the unifying force and the ability to bring everyone together, the focus and the energy of the community to overcome any obstacles. And I think it's clear that there's going to be a number of challenges in Arlington over the next several years as we look at all the building and potential other needs operationally. So to offer you a little bit of background, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, for teeing this up, Vision 2020 really has been active, I think, for the most part, over the last 2 years, and several of us were really there from the beginning. We really have been focused on this idea of bringing together the community for dialogue on what public education in Arlington should look and feel like, what we should experience as students and as learners as a result of going through our system. And through that effort, we've had a number of sessions. Some of you have participated in that over that time. And our goal really right now is, clearly, as it says here, to co-create this strategic vision and this plan with you and with our community. And in order to do that, we want to bring together multiple viewpoints. We want to bring together all of the community and really put forward something that embraces all of our values as best as possible. We want it to be actionable and measurable. That's another important characteristic. And we want it to build excitement and commitment among the community for the changes that might be embedded. So our request tonight of you is really threefold. The first is that we would like to really secure your agreement that this idea of visioning and planning across the entire district is an important priority for next year, and that it should be embodied in a district goal. Second is that we would ask that you allocate funds for a consultant or facilitator to help with that process, much as you've done with the high school process that's going on now. And third, we would ask that the school committee and the administration work with us and other interested groups to put forward a plan to make that an effective process for next year. So what would this process do for the district? Do you want to speak to some of that?
So one of the things that we're hoping to achieve with this process is that there would be much more opportunity to really collaboratively think through what can and can't we do. So trade-offs, what do we have to give up? Superintendent Bodie said, we're not going to do everything in this, but we're still going to really figure out as a community what are the most important things that we would want to be doing, and there would be reaching consensus on those priorities together as a community. In part, just that consensus building process in and of itself is a way to engage and inform a community and really get many more stakeholders really behind that vision, supporting it in many different ways, not just as you've seen a big groundswell come out around very particular ballot measures. I mean, it's been incredible what this community is capable of. We would like to be able to see that kind of mobilization happening around the long-term vision of what we want for our system. And that together we would come up with a unifying document in a process that we could do every couple of years, because you've probably heard, if any of you read any magazines these days, community continuous improvement just trips off the tongues of just about everybody. We want to be able to instill that in our own system, a continuous way to be looking at, are we really meeting those goals? Are we challenging ourselves to be the best systems we can be? Are we aligning not just on a budget, but both vertically and horizontally across the system, across the services we provide, across the kind of vision that we have for our students? Are we continually updating the kinds of success that we really think reflect our community values? Community values are a fungible thing. They change. They need to evolve, and thus we need to be involving the community in trying to define those. And finally, at the same time, we're building out a broad vision 5 to 10-year roadmap that's going to have those actionable steps. So we know where we're heading. We have places and checkpoints where we're making sure we're still on the right track. And there, again, there's far greater understanding and commitment to making that happen. And so that's, as Scott said, it's performance indicators and milestones. So there's way stations along the path where we say, are we meeting them? And we collectively sit back and figure out where we need to go differently if we're not. So how is this different from what we were just talking about? Well, for one, it's that trying to hit that perfect mix of a longer time horizon in which we can get those greater number of voices and commitments. There's always a pressure to get something down. Again, we just talked about the fact that we want to roll something out as quick as April. Well, that really cannot be done if we are committed to having this greater voice at the same time, nor do we want to be sitting around doing a process forever. So how else is it different? It really is building on that common understanding. So in Goal 1 of Student Achievement, which we just heard from Dr. McNeil, really unpacking for the community and for the students and for the parents and for the educators, what are we truly thinking about when we say prepared? That's what a lot of our work over the past 2 years has been focused on, is getting an understanding of how the community defines prepared. Coming up with that unifying statement so that we really are starting from that vision in the future, and that is what drives all decisions, and all voices in the process, all stakeholders are understanding what that means. And finally, this is a really tricky one, but how do we go from very good to great? Nobody is standing up here saying the system is broken, the system isn't working. We're saying we think it can be better. We think it can be world-class, and we really want to figure out what that looks like, and we're all getting farther involved in the cost commitment and those next steps.
There's a recent precedent in Arlington for, not identical, but a similar kind of planning that is worth paying a little bit of attention to. A few years ago, the Department of Community Development and Planning came to the realizations that they were facing a lot of big issues that were coming up in the future. Some of them were land development issues, some of them were economic development issues. It turns out that a master plan that's useful for their purposes touches on a great portion of the life of the city, from community development and cultural organizations to the environment, to historical preservation, and to land use and planning. The plan that they already had, they were doing a lot of good things, but things had sort of fallen apart, and it was not providing the guidance to them that they thought they needed to begin to work through the problems that they saw coming up. It had also been many, many years since they'd had a chance to go to the community and to solicit, not just on particular issues, but to solicit a broad sense of what the community was looking for and what it thought its problems and its opportunities and Arlington's opportunities would be. And so it began, the Department of Community Development began a planning process that is part of a kind of process that's envisioned by state law, and that in a way makes it more cut and dried than what it is that you all would be facing. But the general stages are the same, and the purpose was the same. The beginning was gathering data through lots and lots of investigation about the current condition of the town and the facts, and lots and lots of investigation of what people actually wanted. They had surveys and meetings and questionnaires and so forth designed to solicit from the community a sense of what they thought Arlington was about, what was good about Arlington, what was not quite as good about Arlington, and the ways in which Arlington could be made a lot better. As a result of all of this, there was a process that involved the community through a committee that was established, an advisory committee to provide advice and to actually ultimately develop the terms of the master plan. Once they had that, there were hearings on the master plan, quite a number of them, 4 or 5, lots and lots of revisions and lots of opportunity for both other agencies within the town and for the community to have an input in what ultimately emerged. At the end of the day, through the help of a consultant and the continued action of the planning department, there was a single document. It turns out that as a matter of state law, the redevelopment board is the approving authority for this, but they didn't stop there because this wasn't about getting a single approval from a particular body. This was about getting buy-in from the entire community. So there was a continued buy-in process through other committees and agencies of the government, and ultimately they brought it to town meeting, which approved it in concept and as a guide for future decisions on the matters that have been touched. That happened in 2016, and I think all of you who've been following what goes on in town meeting is aware that the master plan has pretty much driven the agenda, particularly in the land use side, but in many different areas as to what it is the community should do. A fairly strong implementation process was established. Committees were established. Last year, a committee, the residential working group, produced a number of zoning ordinance amendments and other actions designed to protect residential communities. This year, there's a process of recodification of our zoning ordinance as a first step towards reviewing some of the policies of the zoning ordinance. All of this could have been done anyway. You can always bring that up. What's happened is, one, that it's all part of a single vision. We know where it's supposed to go and how all the parts are supposed to fit together. And second is that everything that is coming out of this process and going to town meetings has the prestige behind it of a process that involved the community and got not consensus, because there's never consensus about anything, but a very strong community expression of where we are and where we should be going. And that has made the process of dealing with some very difficult issues much, much easier than it would have been if we had not had this planning process. Now, obviously, the schools are going into a period that is going to be interesting times, to quote the Chinese proverb. There's lots of decisions that are coming up, decisions that this committee is going to make and decisions that town meeting and the voters are ultimately going to make as well. And having the prestige of a planning process, a clear sense that was open to everybody and made a big priority out of bringing everybody in, is a great platform for beginning the kinds of decisions and the kinds of going to the community that the schools are going to need to do over the next several years.
So there are also examples of this in education, right? So this is an example in Arlington, but there are examples of this sort of process, maybe streamlined, all over education. And as an example, right, here's one here, a strategic plan that was done in Florida. A couple of the key features that I think are worth pointing out, right? There was a 5-year time horizon in this plan, and it was district-wide. It included every student and every school in the district in the plan. It started with values, strategic priorities, and pathways for implementation, right? So it wasn't just a mission statement. It wasn't just a vision statement on a website. It was a coherent document that had implementation and milestones baked in. And it also had quite a bit of thinking, and it helped to drive decisions and priorities. So we talked about a planning process in Arlington, talked about a planning process out in education. Other neighboring districts are doing this work as well. So one other example is what's happening right next door in Winchester. And Pat, maybe you want to speak for just a second about that as well.
They're in the process. They have come up with a draft that they came up in November of a vision, which is the illegible part on the right-hand side of the slide. But the legible part indicates what they're about, and it's a similar sort of thing. It's attempting to articulate a vision for Winchester schools, what it is they want, what it is that it means to be successful. And they have not yet committed at this point to doing a strategic plan based on that, although I think that most people expect that they probably will. And again, while they have dealt with community participation in a somewhat different way, they've brought in students, as I think anyone would want to do, teachers, administrators, and members of the public, both within and without the school system, as a collaborative way of being able to address these issues. They're convinced that they need to have the vision first, because that's what pulls everything together and helps lay the basis for a series of more specific plans and more specific goals and objectives that everybody can realize are going all in the same direction, and it's in a direction that everybody wanted to do.
So, just, quickly in conclusion, right, and then I'm sure you'll have some questions. We feel that this is an important endeavor for us to undertake, and, frankly, it's critical, and we know that there are a lot of other priorities, and there are a lot of other things going on, including running a school district. But we feel that this is really important, and we, hope that you share that feeling, so.
Thank you very much. Jennifer, go ahead.
Hi, I want to talk about what's happening in Winchester. So Winchester is with a group of a bunch of districts, including Lowell, who's working for the Center for Collaborative Education. It's a three-part process. The first part is done by this guy, Jack Schneider, who I saw years ago when I first got on the school committee, who's fabulous. And we actually brought in somebody from the center to talk to us about this process. Arlington was thinking about maybe joining this coalition, and I think decided not to because it was a three-part process, and we felt that the second and third part we were actually doing better than what the direction they were going to push us in. But we weren't doing this community involvement, strategic planning, visioning process. So that was the part that we weren't doing. We talked at the time about maybe paying for Jack or for somebody else to come in and do something, and what happened, I think, I don't remember, I think that you were in some of these meetings and not all of them, but just because of timing issues, is that we were about to enter into a stage where we were going to really strongly vision about the high school, and the thinking was that timing was the wrong timing. I think next year is actually a fabulous time to do it, because we will be moving on from that initial visioning about the high school. We are talking about doing debt exclusions, overrides, stuff like that, and sort of the more we go to the community and ask them what they want, sort of the more valuable that process will be. So I'm all for this. I think it's fabulous. I'll be supporting it in the spring when we push for our goals.
Bill?
Thank you very much for the time and effort. I really appreciate that. Now I'm going to ask you a very mercenary question.
Yeah.
What do you think a consultant would cost?
Well, I think, we're willing to go back and do that piece of research. We've even been talking a little bit about that amongst ourselves.
I've got to be honest with you. I support everything that you're going forward, but as you said yourself, the priorities and stuff.
Yeah.
And my support of this is hinging just on that aspect of it. That's the only thing. I hate to be mercenary, but that's where we are.
Yeah. Well, I think we're happy.
Or I am, anyway.
We're happy to take on the action, and maybe we can work with the schools to actually kind of figure that out and come back with something specific. Yeah. Len?
Thank you. So I'm all for strategic planning. I've encouraged the administration to develop a more strategic approach to developing goals and multi-year plans, and we've actually seen a bit of that. The elementary principals came back with a multi-year plan about what they want to accomplish. So I'm all for strategic planning and multi-year plans and getting a better sense of where we want to go. I've been involved with several consultant-driven strategic visioning exercises that have all mostly sat on a shelf somewhere. So part of the problem, I think, with those types of exercises is buy-in by the administration and the community and all that. And I'm not certain that, we have that with so much going on, keeping our administration busy. So I would ask, for the administration to think about their thoughts on entering into this type of process, whether this is the right time. I don't want you to answer right now. Look at what other districts have done with these types of things, and to see, whether it's something you're willing to buy into, because without that, then it's just throwing money out the window.
Pierce?
I would echo what Mr. Carden said, and I'd also add, I'm less certain that next year is just free sailing. I'm right now really focused on getting the high school through, getting it to the next stage, which will be the debt exclusion vote, hopefully coming in the spring. And there's going to be a lot of decisions being made by us, by the building committee, and then with input from the town over the next year, not just this spring. And I'm concerned that, first, there's only so much we can do. The committee, the administration, and also so much we can ask the townspeople to come in and work on. And I don't want to sell the high school short by doing, putting out too much stuff for people to be participating in. So I'm concerned about that. And I'd point out that, yes, Winchester is doing this, but they just finished their high school. It's done. So they're in a totally different space in terms of what the burdens are on the administration and on the staff and things like that. And there's a lot going on right now. Yeah.
So if I could say in response, I think we appreciate that. And, I think that we can define a process that is not overwhelming, right, and is respectful of people's time. That's a key consideration. But, frankly, there are so many moving parts, it really underscores the importance of this. If you look at, for example, the student as learner discussion, if you look at the Gibbs discussion, if you look at the high school discussion, if you look at the Ottoson, discussion to be, right? There are all these pieces and parts, they're all happening and all taking people's energy, and there's not enough coherency to it, and that in and of itself is a drag on people's time and efficiency.
That may be true, but I would have possibly had a very different answer had you come 5 years ago. The point is, now we are at the point where we are at a certain stage in the MSBA process, and we have to step through the next few stages, and it doesn't matter what else we're doing in conjunction. We have to do these things, we have to do them right, and I'm uncertain whether there would be added value by doing this in conjunction, and I'm concerned that it will damage has the potential for damaging, in that it could diminish public participation in the high school process. And right now, that's my focus. And so I don't feel, I understand you're willing to do a lot, but I think it's really important that people who are responsible to the town, because we are elected officials, we're here because people have put us here, and the administration, we've hired the superintendent, who's then hired everybody else. We're all responsible to somebody. I think it's important for us to have control, and when I say us, I mean the administration, not just the school committee, but to have control over a process like this, not put it on a volunteer group that doesn't have these same responsibilities to the town. So I'm worried about this and now.
Okay, yes, Cindy.
Can I just, do you think that in a year it would be better? 2 years, 3 years? I know that right now we're in the middle of this visioning process for the high school. And, you know, after last night, my understanding is that that's basically going to take us, you know, about a year. And so then when we're done with that, and then when we're in the part of the process where we're actually rebuilding the high school, would that allow us more leeway?
I'm suspecting it will. I'm also finding every time I go to a building committee meeting or a subcommittee meeting that there's like additional layers that I didn't know about. And so I'm like furiously trying to peel off the layers so I can explain them to other people and make sure that everybody understands and that we're getting all the pieces in place. But it's not all the dialogue and everything that needs to happen and when it's happening, and all the stuff is not in one place. And I'm hoping that fairly soon I'll have a handle on this and I'll be able to put it out and make sure everybody understands. But it's like every meeting is, oh, we've got this other thing we're going to have to figure out. And and then there's going to be, and so
right.
You know, it's supposedly it's a well thought out and explained process, and I'm not finding
Right,
that.
so my thought then is just that, I mean, what might be better is to spend the next year figuring out how we want this to happen and implementing it and putting it in the goals for the following year. That's all I'm thinking, is that it might be good to, you know, we don't want to, I love the energy, I love the idea, but I think you're right now, the thing that's got to take all of our energy and all of our thinking right now is the high school. Because if we screw it up, you know, we won't get to that next level. So if we could take this year and make sure that we define this process that we want to have happen, and maybe set it for a goal for the next, you know, set it as a goal next year.
Okay, Paul said something, and I'm going to sum it up because I think we're getting over time. Yeah, Paul, go ahead.
Yeah, okay. I was on the team that developed the strategic plan in Lowell. And I'm sort of the keeper of the data and develop the measurable outcomes for the key performance indicators. So it's something I live and breathe with, and it's important. It's an important process for building community support. That said, there are a couple things that happen in this district. And the first thing is that when we did go into retreat a couple of years ago, we developed overarching goals, which are very similar in nature to the strategic plan. What we, you know, the overarching goals for what we want to have as a district. And I think that we're still holding on to those on one level. But in terms of the strategic plan for educational outcomes, the plan revolves around what you want a child to look like when they walk across the stage and grab their diploma. Then you work backwards. How do we get there? Our high school discussion, by its very nature, is going to do the what do we want the child to look like going across the stage. Because in order to plan what we want our building and our facility to look like, we need to answer those questions. What is our focus towards performing arts? What is our focus towards hands-on education and technology? What are the things we value in a high school graduate? And that must be in the process as we design the high school. So that to do a parallel planning session now against what we're doing for the high school, I think is both duplicative and both counterintuitive, and it may develop some conflicts out there. We need to be united into the high school design. Now, once we have the plan for the high school, once we get all the outcomes we want to do and the goals for our students, then I think it would be a very appropriate point to say, okay, we've designed the high school, we know what we want to put into it in order for our students to get there. Then we need to do backwards planning coming from the high school all the way down to pre-K. What is the path we need, and what, you know, where are we aligned, where are we falling short? So this is an important thing to do, but we've got to get the high school done first. as the foundation of the work.
I don't think that we've proposed anything different, right? I don't think that we're trying to propose anything that would conflict with the high school. I want to be really clear. We understand that priority. You know, nothing that we're trying to say or put forward is meant to interfere with that. And in fact, I mean, I take your comments as really, you know, supportive of the idea that it actually is an extension of that conversation.
Yes.
Right, that we're looking to have. And that's why, in reality, what we're really advocating for is not duplicative. It's not doubling the work, right? It's extending on the work that's already proposed, right? And helping at the right time to make that whole coherent plan stick together.
If we are extending on the work we're currently doing to take what we must do for the high school, to extend it out to how do we bridge, how do we develop the students going from the Ottoson up, and from the Gibbs to the Ottoson, and from the elementaries? How are our pathways working towards the
exactly
goal
right.
that we're establishing? Yeah, I'm all for that.
Right.
I'm,
I want to be really clear. I mean, you use the word duplicative. I want to be really clear that that is not what we're suggesting. Right?
Well, yeah. Then if you're not suggesting being duplicative, then I'm celebrating what you're trying to do.
Okay,
But the high school must be the foundation of this. We can't get off that track. But I would say that I'd want you to be very active participants in the high school process so that we all can work together to pick it up and figure out, okay, this is what we've got now, where do we go?
And I want to just expand on that, because I think expand may actually be part of the way to think about it. It's not about taking the high school conversation off a track. It's about ensuring that conversation does in fact connect to these other pieces. So in part what I'm hearing maybe is a timely thing to do now before we start worrying about consultants is to maybe actually better understand what's the full scope of that process and just look at it with that eye of, is there any point along that way where we're actually closing off our ability to connect it to these other conversations? Are we so focused on decisions for the high school that it's in fact going to make it more difficult in a year's time, say, to have this broader conversation? So I think that might be a great interim step, because I totally agree with Scott. I mean, I wrote down the exact same. I mean, we're not talking about duplicative. Let's just make sure now that we are really seeing that high school as the first step in this process, rather than a separate track over here, and then we do Ottoson, and then maybe we think about the override, but that really it's being driven by the conversation that's going to start with the high school.
Yeah, I'm a backwards design kind of guy, and I see it as starting with your outcome and working backwards.
Right, so it's simply, again, it's expanding the conversation to make sure we all understand we're not stopping at the high school, that is sort of stage one in this planning.
All right, thank you so much. We're 25 minutes over, so I'm going to have Kathy just sum it up, and then we're going to move on.
I don't know if it's something. I actually would like to appreciate you being here tonight. Scott and I have talked about this over the last year. I would like more collaboration on the work that we're doing and bringing you into the process, because we do think strategically, and we, as an administrative team, we do think that we're trying to have a lot of coherency throughout the district. In fact, this effort here of having a vision of learner and global citizen is like backward design. As Paul was saying, what do we want a student to be able to, what skills do we want them to have? Clearly, there's content skills, but this is a much broader look at that. And we want to know then, if we have these kinds of goals for our student walking across that stage, how do you then backward it down? What do we need to be doing in kindergarten, first grade, 8th grade? And we're doing that across all of our subject areas so that we have coherency. In fact, I think one of the things that is the strength of this district, by having K-12 curriculum leaders, is we have a lot of vertical alignment and a lot of coherency. What we're really trying to do now is to get the coherency a little bit more across each discipline, so that each discipline is building on what the other discipline is doing to try to create, to help our students. So I'd like you to be part of this process with us. You know, maybe it's a language thing, we're not calling it a strategic plan or vision, anybody would look at what Winchester wrote, it's really, this actually is a lot more detailed, where we are in it. Because I totally agree that we have so much going, I mean, it's head spinning how many things are going on right now. But that doesn't mean we don't want to keep our eye on what the most important thing is. And I said this at MSBA, I've said it, the most important reason we're having the high school done is that we want to be having an environment that supports our educational vision. So I'm hoping that we can talk maybe, not tonight, but another time, a little bit, how we can all combine efforts on this. It'd be great.
Very happy to. Okay, so we're going to stop it here. I think then there's two things, is we have a May 15th deadline to determine goals. So the committee is of many minds, but one thing you can do to help the committee is kind of be more specific about the process, what that might look like. I think people need to understand that. The committee is getting more into the details of the rebuild project, and Kirsty's right, it gets more complicated with every email exchange she and I and others have with Skanska and HMFH. And we do need, I mean, if for budget purposes, we are in the process of building a budget. And so if you can give us some information on that, a range, that would be helpful. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you all.
Thank you. This is really helpful. We appreciate the conversation. Okay, thank you. So we're now going to talk about our priorities for the FY19 budget needs. And am I turning it over to John, Kathy, Kersey?
Not me.
Not Kersey? Tag team, okay? Okay, you got something, great, thank you. Thanks, everyone, for coming in. Thank you.
John has, well, let me just back here. You had asked us to take a look at synthesizing where we are with the budget numbers and what the priorities are, and going back to all of the principals and curriculum leaders to say, okay, what's percolating up to the top, given what we have in the way of potential funding for next year. This is a discussion we're going to present those, and you know, ultimately, it'll be your decision as to what the priorities will be. Over the next month, John will be developing the more the detail of the budget that will be available. I think we set a timeline up for that already, toward the end of the month. So,
Looks good so far. That's a great budget.
Oh, yeah.
No red.
Zero-based budgeting.
Do we need
It's
to
blue.
Do we need to dim the lights for this? Or?
Yeah.
No, not yet.
No, it shouldn't
No.
be. They're coming out white and black.
I will be
All right,
asleep
all right,
in
I
5
just-
minutes. We don't-
We're not picking on
Be
you.
inclusive.
If I'm
Listen
allowed
to
to go to
people.
sleep, I'm going to
You
leave.
got to get a slide up first, Joe.
There you go.
Tell Karen how much we've missed her.
That's the old one. Here we go.
there we go. All right. So you'll recognize the top number. That is the approved bottom line number for FY18. And the estimated budget for FY19 will be about $66 million.
So these are the town appropriations.
These are the town appropriations. This, as you know, that is not the entire budget. Well, we'll talk more about that when we actually present the complete budget. So the increase is about $4.9 million. And in that 4.9 is the 1.3 that is been designated for the staffing costs and operational costs of the Gibbs building opening next year. All right, so the budget increased 4.9. We take the 1.3 million out that is designated for Gibbs. Then we take a look at contractual salary increases for next year. So if we just had the same contract going forward that we currently have right now, that would be the contractual salary increases, which is about almost $2 million. Then we have some fixed and costs and some mandates that we have to fund, and we'll go through each of these slides in a second, which leaves that the remaining available budget for anything additive or new is about $850,000. So what would be the contractual salary increases? There is certainly annual wage adjustments. Again, we're just looking at the contract we have now, with the contract forward next year. That would be $985,000. Step increases, because that's how our contract works with our teaching staff, would be $835,000. Column moves, so this is when people move from a master's to a master's 15 or to eventually maybe to a PhD. Those increases about $85,000. Longevity, because we have more people that are, are getting further along in their time here in Arlington, and contractual, that would be about $50,000. So that is about, as I said, roughly about $2 million.
Should we ask questions as we go on, or at the end?
Yes, you certainly
How do you want to
can.
do it?
You want?
Bill, go ahead. Going back to the second slide, when we talked about the budget breakdown, does that include projected Chapter 70 from the town? Or do we go in with the Chapter 70 we currently have?
So that number for the town appropriation is from the long-range planning committee's projections.
Okay. Thank you.
That includes.
And on the next slide down, the estimated wages, does that include the contractual increase, the first line?
So it-
985?
Or is that,
It assumes
The reason I'm asking this, to me, you've got a step increase and a column increase. Those both are affected by the contractual thing. And so if we have, if we have $835,000 as a result of steps, which includes the contract, and 85 column changes, where is the 985 coming from? Because that, to me, should be all the teachers.
that's what we're negotiating.
No, no.
That's money to negotiate with.
Year-to-year increases.
No,
that would be a COLA.
Okay,
Yes.
okay, then, so,
Right? The 985 is the money to negotiate with.
but shouldn't, my increase, as a teacher, I have A for this year.
Yep.
My next increase after contract will reflect it in the column and the step.
Well, you may not go both.
I automatically get the step,
Right, you get the step.
as long as I'm within the 12.
That's what
as long
that
as
is.
I'm
That's
within
what the
12.
835
Where I'm coming from, Jeff, is I don't understand. I'll talk to John separately on this. Thank
Are you
you.
thinking it's double counting?
Yes,
No, it's not. It's not.
that's why I just said, I'll talk to John separately. He'll straighten me out.
Okay.
Thank you.
I have a
Thank you,
question.
Bill. Thank you. Go ahead.
On the Gibbs 1.3 million, is that going to cover the costs
What cost?
of Gibbs?
The increased operating costs?
Yeah.
Yes, the operating costs, yes. And also the staffing costs that will.
Yes,
that we'll
that's
have to have
mostly
there.
what yeah, so
Yes.
it covers all the additional staffing and things that we have decided that we need.
We're certainly going to make it work. We're working on the schedule, we're almost there. I think that I've gone over this so many times, I'm feeling very comfortable that this will cover it, yes.
Okay.
And this is just the cost beyond transfers from
Yes.
Audison. This is
Right,
just
no,
in
no, no,
addition.
yes,
Okay.
exactly. And I'm just asking, I know that that's what the town is giving us, but I'm asking you.
Yes.
Is that actually going to meet the needs of opening the Gibbs, or do we really need more than just that 1.3? Is it really gonna cost us more like 1.5? That's what I wanna know.
I have gone over this now for 8 months, and it has changed. It has increased from where we were, as Mr. Cardin has pointed out, because you get more refined about what you need.
Right.
Each time you go at it. The final thing that would be very helpful is to have this schedule done so we can see what the FTEs would be needed to make it work.
So
That often happens at the secondary schedules. It happens every year. You go into scheduling, student choice, there's less student choice at the middle school level, but nonetheless, you might find out you need, in June or July, you need another 0.2 whatever in order to make the schedule work.
Right.
And so there's that, but I think that, Will it actually be the blueprint of what I have? I think the bottom line number will be yes, but how the FTEs could shift a little bit, that
Right.
could change, yes.
Okay, but that includes everything from more janitors to teachers to?
Yes.
Okay, all right, that's, I
Yep,
just
and
wanted to
even
know.
in operating costs and traffic supervisors and the positions that we would need to have
Okay,
to duplicate.
cool, thanks.
Okay.
That's it.
Any other questions about gives or on this?
All right, so so our mandated costs here, there is a tuition inflation that we're expecting. In fact, I've gotten a number of letters this year of many private schools going up in tuition, sometimes substantially. We also always have a look at what students might need out-of-district placement, and this is about the cost of about half of the people that would be on that watch list. We're going to be doing a new transportation contract, and it likely is going to go up. Obviously, do we know it's going to go up exactly this amount, but we're putting in what we think is a reasonable estimate of that. We need to have additional services, testing and materials. An estimate for that is $50,000. Translation and interpretations. This is, as you know from our CPR, this is something we definitely need to have in our budget. Rather than, it's not that we haven't been doing this, but we need to identify actually how much is involved. And then a part of a MOU, we have a custodial. So the total amount there is $825,000. So leaving for additives would be about $850,000. And as you heard the principals and curriculum leaders talking about this in December, the asks that they really identified was probably in excess of $3 million easily. So we've spent a fair amount of time thinking about this over the last couple of weeks as to what are the real priorities at each level. I will say, as we look at the budget additives globally, what I can see, and I think everybody would agree, is that we're moving more toward a secondary needs at the moment, particularly at the high school. Last year, the bulk of the money went to the elementary. In fact, I gave that analysis to the principals, but the bulk of the money did go to the elementary, and has been the case really over the last couple budget years, because there's been a need there. That's been important. Last year, we saw a little bit of an uptick in Addison because we saw the need there for additional clusters. So at the elementary level, I know there's parents here tonight that spoke quite eloquently about wanting full-time teaching assistants in the kindergarten. And one of the things that came out in some earlier presentations this fall was what was one of the problems, and what was the problem around curriculum. And that was that the TAs often leave before math, and we do the math part of the kindergarten curriculum. So the issue is, how do we support math curriculum teaching with additional support? And so we've had some discussion about that. We have discussion on Monday about it. And one of the ways one of the schools has done it this year, they do not have full-time TAs in every kindergarten, but they have half the grades they have 2 full-time TAs, is how they schedule the kindergarten for math. So when 2 of the kindergartens are having specials, that's when they teach math in the other 2, and the TA goes there in the afternoon, and then goes to the other 2 classes when they teach math. So when we did an analysis of if that could work, it's a lot more scheduling. It's much more of a scheduling challenge for the principals, but they are in favor of doing that because of some other needs that they've identified collectively. So we're adding enough TAs so that if you had 4 kindergartens, we would have 2 full-time TAs. If you had 3 classes, we'd do the same thing, 2. So either 2, 3, or 4 would give it 2 full-time TAs. We might even have more than that at the end of the day. Also, there are, one of the things that I'm not sure that you all know, is that when we moved into the Tools of the Mind program, one of the things we did was also do training of our TAs. And so there's a part that also has to be, a lot of these TAs already had that training, and there are some of our trained Tools TAs who do not want to be full-time. So if we did not have a position for them, we're going to go through a whole process of training that we would have to do. I'm sure that every year we do training of new kindergarten teachers and teaching assistants as well. So at any rate, the 3.5 that we have in here for kindergarten TAs would create, would staff that kind of a model. Then we have I'm going up from the bottom up. We have 2 teacher reserve positions. That's very thin, I have to admit, because we already know probably where we're going to need one. Most likely at Brackett, because there's three classes graduating, and there were probably 4 kindergartens coming in. So that's, and we don't see any place for collapsing 4 into 3. So effectively, there's 1 reserve here. I mean, that we could have a surprise in terms of kindergartens, but that hasn't been the case in the last few years, at Brackett anyway. So we also have some reserve for teaching assistants. And then the 2 things that everyone feels very strongly about is that Thompson needs more social work support, and we also need another literacy coach at the elementary. One of the things that is the case in talking about coherency, we've introduced the Lucy Calkins reading program as well as the writing program, but at 2 of the grades there is it's really back to what we had before, and so we're trying to create a coherency at the elementary level, and that's going to need much more support for teachers. So that's our rationale. I don't say that full-time teaching assistants is not valuable. It's one of these things, you just try to look at what we have in the way of funds for all of our needs, and how can we achieve what we need to have. Mr. McNeil looked at what is the case for full-time teaching assistants, and it really varies from district to district. Newton doesn't have it. Other EdCo districts do have it, but then some other EdCo districts, they might only have it for math and reading in the kindergarten. So there's a lot of variability in this. But I think the key thing is, and what really resonated with me when the parents came in the fall was, I think they're right. I think we do need to have teaching support, TA support, when we do our 2 major curricular areas in the kindergarten. And so I saw that as the problem, and how can we address it? Do you want to talk about kindergarten before I go to middle school?
Kindergarten, if I may. I appreciate that. I appreciate the recognition for the 2 core areas, but there was another element that I think is truly important. The social and emotional and psychological and special ed needs identification, I think we all agree, the earlier they're identified, the easier, the less money involved in dealing with them and helping the child. All the things that were said tonight at different times, a couple of people mentioned the math, a couple of people mentioned the reading, but they talked about all the other areas. Kindergarten, and you're tired of hearing me saying it, is a unique educational experience that needs as much support as possible. I don't see the value of not investing full-time TAs at the kindergarten level. Ideally, it would be perfect in every class to support every single teacher. That's not realistic financially. But I see that the money not invested here is going to cost us more money down the line in special ed and other issues going forward.
Go ahead.
So Len had his hand up first, then Jennifer.
Thanks. So I mean, I want to be clear as well that I support full-time kindergarten TAs. I think having 1 TA to share between classes, I understand they can cover the math, but you've got one person who has to then learn about 40 to 50 different students, and it's just not as ideal. So it's relatively low cost. If I had to say what to do to fund that, You've got 4 reserved TAs. You already have a lot of class-size TAs. The idea that we're going to need additional class-size TAs is somewhat unlikely. So I would put all of those TAs in the kindergarten and also put the other items, the literacy coach and social worker in reserve to see if there is funds that show up to fund that. So I just want to be clear that, as you're putting this together, I mean, I think we still need to scrub the numbers to see if we can find some more money as well. I do hope that you will find the money for the kindergarten TAs.
I'm actually, so full-time kindergarten TAs has been a priority of teachers for many years. It's certainly become a priority for parents, but I actually worry about a policy of full-time kindergarten TAs for the following reason. We have a wide variety of class sizes, and we have a wide variety of needs. So were we to focus all of our resources on full-time kindergarten aides, we might choose then to not have a full-time aide in the first grade classroom that's 24 students, that particularly difficult kid. One of the things we've done as a district is we've put TAs where there's a need, either because of class size or because of kids that are particularly tricky, as they do become. I think it's not great that our policy is the same across all grades, so that the sort of the numbers that trigger our alarm are the exact same in kindergarten as they are in 4th grade. I think that there should be different numbers, but I do worry about losing the flexibility.
Cindy?
I think that the kindergarten TAs are imperative if there is a class that is 20 or bigger. I think that it's just unfathomable. As someone who teaches a class of 25 6th graders, which can be an utter handful, I cannot imagine 24 kindergartners, because it's like cats, right? They're going everywhere. I mean, at least my 6th graders, most of them can sit still and wipe their own noses and get themselves to the bathroom. A lot of things that I take for granted. So I cannot imagine if we have, I feel it is absolutely imperative if a kindergarten class is 20 or greater that it have a TA. I mean, if we can work it so that we have some that are less than that, then maybe they don't need one, but I think that, is it possible to cut the social worker to 0.8 and get us another TA? I mean, the cost of a TA is very small, and the same with the literacy coach. I know that those are important, but can they start with slightly less so that we can have the TAs, like we said, in the younger grades, and really, so I just want to make sure that we're, kind of thinking along those lines. But I do think that the numbers for kindergarten really have to drive our need for TAs.
Okay, Paul?
Yeah, I mean, I ran an early childhood kindergarten operation, and kindergarten kids are high variance, and no, it's true. It's developmentally within the course of any kid, you've got a span. Plus, a 5-year-old, a year's difference is 20% of the lifespan of the child. So the developmental reach within that classroom is huge. And all it takes is one child who is very needy at any one given time, and that can come all of a sudden. You could be really stuck. I had a full-time TA with all my kindergartens and preschools, and they were sort of an essential part of the operation, because you need to have a couple of set of eyes on kids that are that young. And with what we're doing now in terms of our kindergarten curriculum, the documentation and the monitoring of kids, the checklists, are pretty extensive and requires a lot of attention of the teacher to instructional tasks while the kids are with you, and that having a second set of eyes in the room with those children seems to be essential. And TAs are not overly expensive compared to doing a half-time TA for each class. I don't think the budgetary impact is particularly large, relatively speaking. You know, dollars are dollars, and it's a tight budget. But I think that this is probably the next thing to do. If we're talking about my priorities, it's that, and maintaining the quality of the instruction we have, particularly within the split of the Odison next year, so that we are providing kids with the same experiences, same quality experiences next year that we're doing this year.
Thank you.
I just had, Bill, if we're off the kindergarten, because there was one other thing I wanted.
I have one question about kindergarten.
The kindergarten?
Yeah.
Go ahead,
I'll wait.
Actually, I just have a question. So under the current proposal, would there be a time that you'd have all the kids in the classroom and fewer than 2 eyes? Because I know that kids are in specialists some of the time. So under this proposal, would there be times that you'd have all 24 kids or whatever, 22 kids, but have only one teacher?
There could be time in the afternoon.
Okay.
'Cause a lot of the,
Don't kindergarten TAs go with go to the specials too?
no,
They don't?
no.
Mine follow the
Mine follow the kids all the time.
Currently.
Yeah, currently.
Not currently,
Yeah.
okay.
Because we've got half-time.
Okay.
Right,
if
right,
you-
I guess,
Let
yeah.
me rephrase it. If they were full-time, would there be an expectation for them to follow them to the specials?
I don't, that's a possibility.
Okay,
That's
okay.
definitely a
My
possibility.
experience has
Yeah.
always been that way. Okay.
Yep.
Go ahead,
Yeah. There's no reason why that would not be the case.
I wanted to ask questions.
Okay. So Bill, you want to ask a question?
Yeah.
It's not TA
But
related.
it
On
is-
the, on.
It is TA related, your question? Because I want to stay on TAs and get that over with first.
Yep, I'll wait.
Okay. I'm trying, okay, so I haven't been able to go back. I wanted to understand how many more TAs we would need to add to get to full-time for all the kindergartens. Just, I'm trying to get a sense
We had,
of,
Five is how much was
it was nine, well, yeah. it's-
Five was
it's-
the.
6 more.
Six more FTEs.
Right.
So there
Right.
would be, yeah, six
Six-
FTEs.
About
in
110,000.
I'm sorry,
Oh, what was the
above and
9.5?
beyond?
Not people.
Let Kirsty finish.
Sorry, I was just
Okay.
confused. Yeah.
You've got 3.5 here. How many more would we have to add to get to full-time and everything?
6
Six
beyond.
Six more, so
FTEs.
for a total of 9.5.
Correct.
Okay. Second, just a comment. I think, so I heard a lot of concerns from parents tonight. I'm not sure all of them map to what my understanding of what TAs do is. I don't think that some of the things that was assumed that TAs do is actually what they do. I also think that our classrooms have methods in place that are how teachers address things when someone has to use the bathroom and there's only the one teacher. And I would hope at some point in the future, perhaps the near future, we could have some discussion about just the mechanics of kindergarten so that everyone understands that
That'd be good.
there are not safety issues.
But not only that,
and-
it would either support or not support the need for the full-time TA.
Yes. I think,
Bathrooms are in the classrooms.
right, but I'm saying, I think we should have this out in the public so that everybody understands this, because I think it's not well understood by people who haven't had a kindergarten, or it is not, maybe well understood isn't the right word, but not everyone has a full depth of knowledge of how kindergarten works. And
We can have people come in and talk. There was one vision, I think, that was expressed, that the kids would be running around. Our kindergartens are very well-run, very well-run, and there's a lot of learning that goes on. Yes, would most of the kindergarten teachers prefer a full-time TA? Yes. Would we as well? Yes. So it's possible that these this is also special ed as well. So we could reduce, yes, if there is a need for an extra teacher, this is how thin, this is thin. I'm not saying that it's not thin. If we need an extra teacher in a classroom, that's the reserve positions. If the 4.0 FTE TAs reserve, that's also special ed. That's not necessarily large classroom. We have large classroom TAs now. They will be redeployed based on the class sizes that exist.
I think it's very important for us to know the delineation between special ed TA and regular TA, because in the breakdown, in making decisions on this here, special ed TAs, a TA may be mandated by an IEP for one child, where the TAs that I'm talking about, and I don't want to put words in the mouths of the parents, but we're talking about the general education program being supported. So I don't mean to be rude saying we're mixing apples and oranges, but I think that's important to make sure we know.
Right now, we believe that our special education programs we put a lot of money into having more special education teachers in each one of the elementaries. They're all supported with the teaching system. We feel that the current staffing is fine. We weren't asking for more staffing. But you don't know, we're sitting here in January, what's going to happen in July. So these are reserves for those eventualities. We could, certainly, that's why this is open for discussion tonight. I'm just saying what we were looking at in terms of what the things we feel we really need to have out of the many things that were asked. And if the full-time TAs for kindergarten is the priority of the school committee, then something else is going to have to change here.
I just wanted to clarify around the special education TA. If a student does have support in their IEP or individualized education plan, and it calls for a TA or a special educator support, that isn't necessarily a one-to-one. Those are different distinctions, and I know that term has gotten in the past thrown around between students who have a very specific one-to-one aid versus students who have TA support in their grid. So I just want to make that clear, that it's...
But it all should be separate from the TAs that we're talking about in general education support. That's all I was looking for. Okay, you have a person?
I actually want to follow up on what you just said, because I think this is, so when ignoring the kids who require a one-to-one aid, because that's very clear, but the ones who require a TA in the classroom, is that TA also able to help out other children in the class? See, this is where, yes,
Okay.
this has come up before, and that was my understanding, and I know it's not Mr. Hayner's
I will disagree with that,
understanding.
because as a child advocate outside this district, when I find out a TA is supposed to be available for assistance for a child on an IEP, that TA has to be available as needed, and if he or she is helping somebody else, makes it very difficult to drop one and go to another.
I think the DESC has a very clear advisory on how restrictive a one-to-one TA can be and how that can actually be more restrictive than removing a child from an environment. So I would caution against actually plugging an adult to just one student.
I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about what the question, correct me if I'm wrong, was asked, if a TA is to assist a child on an IEP, could they go and help somebody else? And I'm saying that's a possibility, but that TA has to be available for the IEP student.
I agree. And I think what the question you asked previously around how TAs are used in general, there's a lot that goes on in a classroom and how you structure and set up a classroom so that if you are having flexible grouping, you're going to have the TA perhaps in a small group of 3 to 4 students. One of those may be the student who has the IEP, and they're working with some other people who have been identified with a lagging skill, and they're working on that. So there are ways in which you organize a classroom to do exactly what you just described.
The TAs, I just got to say this, Jeff.
Enough.
This TA, excuse me, the TA that they're looking for full-time in the kindergarten is to work with the majority of the students while the teacher, the professional, is doing the assessment at all the levels that the system and the state and the federal government require. That's the need for the TA full-time in the kindergarten.
Thank you, Bill.
Can I go to the next one? the other question, real
Well,
quick.
Kirsty was
Oh,
actually, she
sorry.
had the floor.
Go for it.
Kirsty had the floor.
I'm not giving it up.
Yeah.
So the other thing I wanted to understand, and I hope we can present later about kindergarten, is how is identification of special needs made? And do we need an extra set of eyes in the classroom to make sure that all kids are identified? Or, you know, when are most kids being identified? Is it before they get into kindergarten? Is it, you know, I'm just saying, I think.
Initial.
Well, that's,
Some.
I'm saying, I think it would be helpful to have a broader understanding of this. All of that being said, I'm kind of leaning to what Cindy is saying. I think there should be a cutoff, and above that cutoff, then we should have a full-time aide, and somewhere in the 20 range sounds good. I need to think about it a little more. But I think some of these things are important so that everyone understands why I'm saying I don't feel it's necessary to have a full-time TA in there. I know that there is a part-time, and some of the things I felt like I heard made it sound like there was never any other adult in the room. And I think it's important to remember there's always a part-time, you know, there's someone there for half the day. So we're talking about the other half of the day. So.
Okay.
But anyway, there's often more adults than that, too.
And that's why I want to bring this out, because I don't think this is coming, it hasn't come up in the discussions, and I think it should.
The other thing.
So the other thing,
In the,
so we're moving off TAs, we're going to talk about something else besides TAs, correct? Go ahead.
as secretary, I'm supposed to go over and check out the minutes. One of the things that was in the minutes in the discussion we had relative to the CPR at the last meeting, the current minutes for our approval tonight says, Dr. Bodie said the staffing and salaries of those in special education should be addressed in the FY19 budget requests. Is that on this page, or is it somewhere else? And I'm assuming what we were talking about with the additional pieces, that isn't the message, so, on the CPR.
On the CPR, we're not hiring more team chairs, if that's what you're asking.
No, not
the
chairs.
issue is
The CPR
cancellation.
mentioned that, one of the responses to why we had problems with the CPR was the amount of staff we had. And
You're referring to the investigation that the school committee had
yes,
moved to have,
right.
so,
And
as a result of the CPR.
right. And one of the answers was that we needed more staff.
So correct. There were comments by Len and Kirsty about the need to.
There was question about caseload
Yeah,
size.
to look at staffing ratios.
Right.
So your question is, does this proposed budget include an increase in staffing to accommodate the requests that were made?
Our minutes that we're looking at to approve tonight,
Bill, just, okay.
I'm sorry.
Does it or does it not? Let's just, I think we're going to narrow the question.
We are in a study right now of caseloads.
Okay.
And so it would be, you could talk about reserve positions in that particular case if we needed to do that. But we don't, at this point, we don't have a complete analysis.
Okay, very good.
Thank you.
I think we got to move things along a little bit. Go ahead.
So I have a question about the middle school. Is that?
Yeah, have we gotten there yet? Because I have questions there
No?
too.
Okay.
Better present it first.
Okay.
Okie dokie.
The request was to have both the 7th and 8th grade have 4 complete clusters. And, you know, just given the monies that are available to meet all the needs, what I'm proposing, and as well as others in administration, is we have a rollout. So that next year, we're seeing the increase in the 7th grade. We have the 4 clusters. Next year's 8th grade will be virtually the same number as this year. So we're not going to see that influx to the 8th grade to the following year. Now, what's currently happening in the half clusters is that they pair up with another cluster for specials. But as soon as you now make it a cluster that's going to go out for the specials at a different time, we're going to have to up the number of FTEs probably in music, art, in various exploratories. We also are probably going to need, it looks like, a 0.2 increase in world language to be able to schedule it. And frankly, it may actually be more than that. We just haven't run the schedule yet, but our early estimates would indicate that. So it's not exactly what everybody had wanted to have, but I think that it meets the needs of the school next year. With regard to the high school,
We have questions on the
all
middle
right,
school.
sure.
Oh, so,
On the middle school, so one at a time. Lennon has had a first line, go ahead.
You were first because you had a question. Oh, I go first.
Good.
So a half cluster, a cluster is 4 teachers, a half cluster is 2 teachers. Why is
It's 3.
changing it from a half cluster of 2 teachers
My questions.
requiring 3 teachers instead of 2 teachers?
The numbers are going to go from about 40 to 50 students
No,
next
no,
year.
the number of
The clusters.
teachers. Why do you need 3 teachers? Aren't there already 2 there?
Oh, it's, one of those teachers is going to Gibbs. And it's just the way the shifting around that's happening, we will need.
Yeah, so I guess.
Good point, that's
yeah.
a good question.
So I guess when we
Yeah.
see the breakout that we've asked of the middle school level, this year Audison, side by side with next year with Gibbs and Audison, we'll see this better. But
can
in
have
my
that for the next
mind,
meeting.
in my mind, this person that's leaving from the Audison should be part of the 1.3 million.
Right.
And not a separate request here. So we'll see all that detail. We don't have to get into it now, but hopefully if that's accounted right in the 1.3 million, then maybe that will free up some money.
That
But
would
we'll have
be-
to see.
yeah.
We'll have to see how that works out.
You're thinking perhaps that person is double counted,
Perhaps.
perhaps.
Jennifer.
All right, so that was my first question. The second question is about the adjustment counselors or guidance counselors. I know that we had, because of the split, we have a need. Are those expenses being put onto the expenses that we're expecting for the Gibbs?
Yes.
Okay.
Those are all mine, too.
Anyone else in the middle school? Cindy, you're all set? Okay.
All my questions as well.
Now, good Kirsten.
I had an elementary school question.
Elementary.
Too late.
All right, go ahead.
Do we have enough teachers in reserve for what we expect? Not taking all of our current population and moving them up a grade, but looking at our projections and stuff, how many extra classes do we think we're going to need to open?
At the moment, 1.
Really?
Yes.
That's what she said. Yeah, she said that
I will
before.
say, though, that it means that what's happening at one school, we're going to collapse 4 into 3. Made sense to do it next year, so there would have been a need there. But, based on our forecast, this would be my answer.
In January.
Yeah.
In January, precisely so, in January.
Okay, thank you. That's my question.
All right, now we're on to the
High school.
high school. You want to make your,
Basically, the principal asked for, originally in excess of what? It was like seven FTEs. And then came back and said, well, I could manage to schedule the school and do with the needs at 5.4. And I said, well, we need to tighten that up even more. So what this is a mix of different FTEs for different departments. So that has a fungibility to it, because you might say, right now, I need a 0.6 in science. Actually, it may end up being I need a 0.8 there, and I can reduce something there. Until we run the schedule, which is totally student choice-based, how that gets distributed is not known yet. But based on the number of students that couldn't get a full schedule, number of students that are coming in next year to the high school, this is the estimate of what's needed.
Glenn?
Does that include the dean going to full-time?
Yes.
Okay. So that would be the one thing that I would not be my priority. I mean, given the numbers are increasing by maybe about 30 or 40 students, maybe we could postpone that another year. I don't know the particularities of the person that's holding the position or the expectations of he or she when he took the position part-time, but it seems like, given all these other pressing needs, is that something like the 8th grade cluster at Audison we have to do this year, or can it wait another year? That's just my comment.
Do you want to discuss that, Rob?
There are some union issues too with having someone in a split position like that, with both unions, both the teachers union and the AAA. And really, he could potentially still teach one class, and that would, but I don't know if there's a need. He's an English teacher. I don't know if there's a need for English for an additional one class or 0.2. So that's where it gets a little bit tricky.
Okay.
I think we should be careful about talking about individual teacher here in a budget discussion, just so. Yeah. I would say that if I recall Matthew's presentation, you know, his point was that an additional dean would help to help ensure that more students are known by adults and supported by adults in the building. I think that was a general idea. And it's hard for me to argue with that.
Right. One of the things that's going to happen, and we're going to have to think about this over the next few years, talking about rollout, as we move through this high school project, there's going to need to be the point person among the administration to handle a lot of things. There's been a lot going on the last couple of weeks of having to take around people who are measuring, and it's really taking up more time, and as we go through this process, that's going to be the case. So I think part of the strategy is knowing that's going to be the case, is how you sort of being planful for the years out.
Okay. All right. What else you got?
I think that was it.
I think we had
That's
our-
what we have for 850,
All right.
so
So-
something's going to have to give if I change that around.
Okay. One of our responsibilities tonight, yeah.
Go ahead, you finish.
No, do you have a question, or do you?
No, you finish what you're
So
saying.
one of our responsibilities tonight is accept the number from the town. And I
Oh,
wanna
wait,
know-
no, before you move on to that.
I thought so.
Oh,
Before I move on to that.
What the agenda item is to state our priorities, and we sort of picked at different things. What I want to say, sort of give overall, that I'm very supportive of most of what, you know, was identified as the proposal, with the exception of, you know, I do think we do need to move more focus on the high school. That's good. We do need the 7th grade cluster. I'm disappointed that we can't find a way to fund the kindergarten TAs, and so that's my main objective in going forward.
Okay, does anyone else want to comment on it? Jennifer?
Just a general comment. I know that there's a lot of sort of specific one-time needs and I know that there are sometimes funds from, say, building rentals or something that we might be able to put into those, that we can't commit to hiring somebody with, but that we might be able to buy some easels for the art teachers or some of the technology needs that we have, and I'd hope that we look at that.
So one of the reasons that you only see is the town appropriation is because that's sort of known and fixed at the moment. And with revolving in grants, we don't know yet for grants with Title I and Flex where we are on the poverty line, but also, are we going to target some of revolving revenue to cover those asks we didn't get to in the one time, so.
Good.
All right. Now we have to take a vote to accept, right? Isn't that the word we use, to accept the town appropriation of $60,900
No, 65.
65.
Is that the town appropriation? I'm sorry, 60, could you go back to that?
Yeah.
That was last year's.
I'm sorry, correct. Right,
5/8.
65, the town appropriate, thank you. Right, we don't want to vote that number. We need a motion to accept the town appropriation of $65,860,321.
Move for the purpose to discuss.
Okay, we have a motion from Mr. Hayner. Do we have a second?
Second.
By Paul. Okay, now discussion. Len?
Thanks. So as I always do, I'm going to vote against this motion. I appreciate the support the town is giving us, especially with the extra $1.3 million for the Gibbs, which is, you know, quite generous given how much it's increased over the last year. So it is a generous budget amount, but we're in a point where we haven't really determined what our full need is, and so to accept that at this point is premature. Thank you.
So what would happen if we all voted that way? We don't accept it?
Then the town manager would know that the amount that he's included in his budget was uncertain, and our final budget could come in at a different number.
Okay.
Would we still get the money?
That would be up to town meeting. Town meeting is the one that decides.
Right.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else want to make a comment? Bill?
I feel for similar reasons, historically, I have not voted for a budget based on the fact that I think we are responsible to present the best educational budget going forward, fiscally responsible. If the town meeting then chooses not to pass it, I will then at that time consider doing cuts or rearranging. So I will not be supporting this tonight either.
Anyone else want to make a statement, Kirsty?
Okay. I will be voting for it, not because I don't think we need more money, but because budgeting in Arlington, in my experience, is a team sport. And we don't have extra pockets to be pulling money from right now. And we need to be working together as a team. And we have worked as hard as we can to explain our needs to the town, and I think they've been heard. I wish we could get more money, but part of it is the state, I feel, has not been a true partner in this. But I think the message that we would be sending if we all vote no is one of confusion. I don't want to be transmitting a message of confusion to the town, to our community at this point in time. We have some really big decisions coming up, and to suddenly one off and say, oh, sorry, we're not on this team anymore, we're off running with the ball ourselves, I think is the wrong message. So
Paul has hand up.
Okay. I love voting no on this. It brings me tremendous joy. But there's a couple of realities here. First of all, we've got long-term needs for cooperation with all the stakeholders. We're looking to build a couple of $100 million worth of high school. I am convinced that any school committee, particularly one in this town, could go to war with the finance committee on the floor of town meeting and win for 1 year, and then you poison the well. And the cooperative relationship that we've built up over the years could be whacked all at once. There's nothing in voting this budget number now doesn't allow us to keep pressing through the process between now and town meeting as we identify our needs to say, hey, you know, we can't get within this number. We need to talk, and these are the reasons why. So I view this as a starting point. I view this as a cooperative position. I hate to vote it. It's too low. The reality is right, what Kirsty said, that the state has failed to meet its obligations. They have consistently underfunded education by underinflating the foundation budget so that the money hasn't been there. We have Mr. DeMazy, the House Speaker, who thinks he's running everything, because probably he is, saying that...
Not DeMazy, no.
DeLeo, who's running everything, thinks he's running everything, because he probably is, and saying that we're not going to entertain any new taxes or revenue this year. We need significant reform on the state level. State legislature should operate with the transparency and openness that we do in town meeting. Until that happens, we don't have a viable partner. Our viable partner is the finance committee and the town manager and the people who want this town to succeed. So that's why I have to vote yes.
Vote yes or no? Oh,
Paul's voting yes.
okay.
So Jennifer, then Cindy, go ahead.
Oh, so I'm going to concur with Dr. Alison Ampe, her reasoning. I think that while this is clearly inadequate, and I re-looked up these numbers, so I have them. In 2002, the state supported 21% of our budget, and now they support 14%. So it is very much, the fact that we are so constrained is very much a failure of state politics. But I think that when we've gone to the town and given them reasons for why we need an increase in costs, either on the enrollment growth factor or on the Gibbs, that they have made an effort to meet us partway. Not exactly where we want it to be, for sure, not where we think we should be, but that it has been a collaborative process. And I think that this is an option that we always have available to us, and that we might want to take someday if we felt that it wasn't such a collaborative process. But right now, I'd be voting yes.
Cindy?
Yeah, I think that unless we have a number to counter with or a new process by which we want this to work, this is the way it works here in town. And unless we said to the town, you know what? We came up with a budget of what we need, and it's X, so we reject your Y, then we have to, we haven't done that either. So unless we are going to change the process whereby we get to decide what we need, and then we, negotiate with the town to a price, that's not the way it works. This is right now the process, and, we've agreed to how this process is going to work. If we want to change it, then we need to start making that change. It is not the town's fault that the state is not giving us enough money. So, pissing off our counterparts in town by, saying no to the money that they want to give us, I think is bad. So.
Okay, so I think it's time to take a vote. Good discussion, thanks for all the input. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, and I vote affirmative. All those opposed?
No.
So the motion carries 5-2. Rob, thank you very much. Okay, we move on. Superintendent's report. Is there a way you can speed this up?
Yeah.
Because we're way off time here. Yeah, go ahead.
Way off, I know.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, we are way off.
Okay.
All right. I will try to do that very quickly. On the building projects, last night's forum was a great success. I've heard a number of positive comments of this today, and I know that Rod was at a table in which they were very complimentary of the high school, what extraordinary work they do, administration, teachers, to really have such an excellent school in conditions that are not optimal for the learning that is going on. So that was there. We're going to have more forums. The next one is February 7th, and that's going to have focused on the vision. The visioning group is going to begin meeting next week. We have notified today the people who applied. We had a lot of people apply, and try to, balance it between all the different backgrounds and different constituencies in town, and I think, it's a pretty good balance. So that is all happening. I will say just Gibbs and Hardy are all on track. We're doing fine on that. These other things are just quick announcements. I'm going to have, one of the things you asked for was the organizational chart for technology, and I'm going to go over that right now.
Yeah, so I've done two charts. One is an organizational chart, and one is an evaluation chart. So the organizational chart is up on the screen, and you'll see that the Director of Instructional Technology, you'll see the hierarchy there. You have the superintendent, who evaluates the assistant superintendent, who evaluates reports to, I should say, in this organizational part. So I report to Dr. Bodie. The person that takes over the Director of Instructional Technology would fall within my team, and then that person would evaluate for the other elementary instructional technologists, the middle school instructional technologists, and the high school instructional technologists would report to the Director of Instructional Technology. I have to the right of it, the Chief Technology Officer, which is David Good, who would do some interaction with the instructional technologist, the Director of Instructional Technology, because I would want that person to not only manage the online resources that we utilize in instructional technology, but also have a foot in the door to make sure that everything we have is compatible with the hardware and the software and all the networking that goes on within the district. And then you have the IT department there. So that's like a big overview of the technology department. And then if you look at the next slide, this is the evaluation process that would take place. And I would evaluate the Director of Instructional Technology, and then that person would evaluate the elementary, middle school, and high school instructional technologists. That's an overview from the organizational chart and from the evaluation process.
Questions, Jen?
So do we currently have a dedicated person for elementary, middle, and high school?
Yes.
Okay, I wasn't sure.
Yes.
Thanks.
Cindy, you
and just to be clear that, with the appointment of that person, the evaluation process would not take place until next year.
Right.
That would be the changes that would take place next year.
And she's also elementary.
And she would be kind of double duty for a little bit until we were able to hire someone to come into the elementary.
Hopefully by next year.
Yes.
Any other questions?
Oh, actually,
Yep.
sorry. So this is, since this is a new position, that needs to be reflected in the budget, we would think, right? I mean, or no, is it being money's being moved around, or positions are being moved around? Is that, I can't remember, actually.
Okay, the reason
question
why
probably
it's
answered before.
neutral is that this person works a lot in the summertime.
Right.
And vacations, particularly when we get into MCAS time of the year, April vacation, she's working.
So we're adding another person, but you don't think we're adding extra expenses?
Exactly.
That's what you think, okay. Okay.
Exactly.
All right, now, school calendar for 2018, 2019, first read.
First read, well, this is the first read of the, yeah, it's, everybody can.
It's hard to read up there.
It's hard to read up there, I know. We do this in two parts, and this year I want to speed up the second part of it, but the first part is really to get the key dates on the calendar. Parents want to know when school is going to start. But in terms of conferences and early release all and all of that, there's still some discussion that needs to go on. So these are the essentials. School is going to start on the Tuesday after Labor Day. And we have the no school dates there in N, the holidays that are national holidays or state holidays, they're there as H. This year, the Professional Development Day will be on November 6th because that is the gubernatorial election, and we have an agreement with Town Hall that the level of traffic is just too much to keep school running in the places where there's voting polls. So we have school vacations on here, so everybody knows when they will be occurring. And then at the end of the year, if we had, the 180th day would be on June 18th, but by state regulations, we have actually 5 additional days that act as for the snow days. And so really, in terms of teachers need to know that they have to be available until the 25th. If we go beyond that, the latest we can go beyond that is to Friday, the 28th of June, because we can't go across a fiscal year. But these are just the important dates, and so what I'm asking you to do tonight is to vote this calendar. It's really essentially not much different than last year.
No, we don't
We
vote.
don't vote on the first read.
We don't vote on a first read.
Oh, we're going
It's
to
a
do
first
first
read.
read. First read, sorry,
We'll
okay.
come back in a week, 2 weeks.
2 weeks, we'll do it.
But I think tonight is, the purpose of tonight is to look at this,
Right.
ask questions. Go ahead, Jennifer.
Oh, so just, I have a comment on some of the school committee days.
We haven't put those in yet.
Oh, those aren't the started
Yes,
things?
they are.
Well, they
Yeah,
are
they are.
starred, but
They're
we haven't adjusted them.
Oh, okay, because there's a
we
couple
put them in
adjustments.
as we've done last year, but you may want to change them.
Go ahead, you want to tell us?
Oh, so just certainly the last month, we should probably do the 6th and the 20th, rather than go to the 27th,
Yeah.
especially since the 30th is, there's 5 Thursdays in May. So then we
Right.
have a 1-week break
Yeah.
each time.
Keeps it consistent every other week.
Yeah, it stays every other week, so.
Okay.
And then this is just an open question of whether we want in December to do 6 and 20, or if people feel that that might be too difficult for people.
December, we usually do them back and forth, back together, don't we?
I like the way it is.
Okay, I was
Me
just
too.
raising that question.
It's nice that week
Yeah.
before to
Okay.
have it off.
Okay, great.
And Cindy's promised to come back with candy for us.
Yeah, every
You're
year.
not going to get your candy?
Well, she'll be back every year for the candy.
That is the case.
I just
May have to come back on that one.
want to point out that the dates on 4/23 and 6/18 aren't listed as early release for elementary,
Oh,
and
it's just, yeah.
it also says that we have early release every Tuesday, so we need to
Good
fix
point.
one of those.
I'm sorry, we need to,
We just need to,
4/20
April 23rd.
4/23
April 23, we didn't get an April 23, didn't get
and
an.
June 18th.
Oh, good catch.
Would you? Okay. Would that be an early release day, that the last day of school?
Well, it's not.
It'll
probably
be
not
an
gonna the
early
last day of
release
school.
for all.
If we
It'll
had-
be an EA.
No school days.
E-I-E-I-O.
Last day of school is always a half day.
Oh, fair enough.
But you don't tell the state.
Any other questions
Yes,
about
you
the first read of the calendar? So next week we come back, I'm sorry, in 2 weeks, we come back and do a second read of the calendar.
The 6th, actually, I have to look up something. I didn't realize she'd put the 6th. I thought she was going to do the 13th and the 20th in December, but you prefer this. I think this might be a conflict with an annual conference, but let me double check that between now and then. I'll let you know.
Okay,
Okay,
all right,
thank you.
thank you very much for sure.
And then just
Go
a
ahead.
couple of quick things, these are more announcements, and that is, on January 24th, we are in the process of having visits for the candidates, the finalists for the Addison Middle School principal position, and next week will be our last visit. We will then have a parent forum, and I'm hoping that any of you are able to come. It's going to be on January 24th at Addison from 6 to 9 o'clock. We'll have all 4 finalists there that evening. Also, this coming Monday is the Martin Luther King birthday observance, and the doors open at 6:45, and there is no fee to come, but the program starts at 7:30. I believe you're getting an award, aren't you? That, no?
No.
School committee is, yeah.
That's supposed to be announced.
Yeah. Oh,
I saw- I
every.
thought-
All right.
All right,
Yeah, I know.
the keynote speaker is Dr. Deborah Jackson from Yale Divinity, and then also Paul White and the MLK committee chorus will also be performing. So hopefully many people can come. They're asking if you do come that evening to bring a donation of food.
They also look for money, so don't make, they also sometimes look for money. I once make the mistake of coming empty-handed, so. Bring your wallet.
Bring your wallet.
Bring your wallet instead
Well,
of
please be there. All of us are. Is
That's
everyone
it.
going to be there in the school committee, just out of curiosity?
I'll be there.
Okay, thank you. All right, great. The consent agenda, all items were listed with an asterisk are considered to be routine and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a member of the committee so requests, in which event the item will be considered in its normal sequence. Approval of minutes, regular meeting 12/14/17, approval of warrant number 18130 dated 12/14/2017, total amount $637,313.04. Motion to approve. Moved by Kirsty, second by Bill. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
The motion carries unanimously. Okay, now subcommittee liaison reports, budget.
Okay, budget is in the process of rescheduling our PTO visits, which were derailed by the snowstorm and multiple moves of other things, and we're also going to be scheduling a meeting soon.
Very good. Community relations, Cindy.
We do not have a meeting currently scheduled. We did have school committee chat last Saturday, but no one stopped by.
Doing a good job.
District accountability, curriculum, instruction, and assessment, Paul.
We met last Tuesday, we'll meet again next Tuesday. The discussion last Tuesday was pertaining to the discipline statistics and what we're doing, equitable community for all our students. That presentation will come at the next school committee meeting. So it was more or less a preview and a discussion of what our expectations will be. Next week, we'll be talking about superintendent evaluation form, and the superintendent presented us with some information about what a couple of districts are doing to gain credit for snow days.
That's right. Okay. Thank you, Paul. Facilities?
So we met today, right before this meeting, and we had Paul Marshall, who's John Marshall, thank you. John Marshall, Parks and Rec Director, talk to us about the status of school playgrounds and sort of the thinking and schedule. One thing, so broadly, the town is engaging, and schools are engaging in this collaborative process to try to come up with a real plan for how to fix sort of the which playgrounds are in the worst shape and when they're going to be fixed. And this is something we haven't done before as a school district or as a town. This is much needed. It was interesting to get that information. One of the things that came out of that meeting, though, is given that this process is just beginning, given that we haven't done this before, I think we might want to add to our annual calendar to have a report on the status of our playgrounds each year and the upcoming plan for whether things are going to be fixed or replaced. And,
just where they are.
Yeah, Len?
Is there a consultant doing this? My understanding was that there actually was going to be a consultant that would develop like a 5-year plan or something.
That's the plan, but I think that Mr. Marshall is doing a lot of the work, from what I understand, right now.
But they are busy assessing.
Yeah, no, but they're hiring people in to do there was a study that was done a few years ago. They're using some of that data, and then they're bringing more people in to do analysis.
Of the current.
Yeah.
We're talking about playgrounds that are school district responsible?
Right, so
he's in charge of all of them.
The idea is, rather than have this sort of divided, where the school department only sort of works with the playgrounds that are under school auspices, and the town works on playgrounds that are under town auspices, that we'd work together, and that Mr. Marshall would be in charge of that project.
I mean, the new chair could put it in the incoming chair could put it in the calendar, but we can also put it in policy. And that's why you get the minority report every year, it's a policy.
Right, right. Sure, yeah. So do I need to, I would recommend the policy.
I don't know, it's just the first time I'm hearing it, so I
Yeah.
haven't been able to think about it.
Yeah.
And why don't we think about it?
We'll think about it, yeah, that'd be great.
Yep. Okay.
Policy.
Policies and procedures.
Our next meeting is January 30th at 5:30 to continue the review of, with MASC of the policies.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Shepherd?
Would the chair of the Policies and Procedures Committee like to make a motion pertaining to looking at acceptable use?
Sure. I think the administration was going to bring us the policy. Do we need a motion for that?
No, not necessarily, but I know that you've expressed an interest in that at an earlier time. I just wanted to give you the opportunity.
Either way is fine.
Yeah, I think we can go there regardless.
Okay. School Enrollment Task Force, the Legal Services. Nothing at this time. Arlington High School Building Committee, everyone was there last night. Just about everyone was there last night.
Yes, I want to congratulate everyone who was involved. Jeff, you were a wonderful MC. Kirsty, you did a wonderful job putting it together. Dr. Bodie, Amy Spear, everybody who was involved. It really worked out well.
All the mics worked all the time, too.
Yeah.
Exactly, yes.
Then, by the way, please promote it to friends and your lists and that sort of thing. February 7th, the more people get involved, the more people come, the better.
Can I just make one comment? One of the things that surprised me in that meeting is how many of those parents, or people in the room, did not currently have high school students.
Yeah.
So when we asked them the question of, what do you like and what you do dislike, they weren't sure yet.
Yeah.
And so I think it'd be valuable to continue our community outreach and sort of get people in the building and show them around and talk about it. And have some tours, yeah.
This was noted and is being thought about.
Yeah, no, I know it was. I just wanted to sort of mention that as well.
At my table, I sat literally, there were 2 women who have children in kindergarten,
Mm-hmm.
and they had only ever been in here to register.
Right.
And they were appalled, which is why they came last night.
Yeah.
It was a good crowd. There was a lot of interesting people. Yeah, good.
Yeah, I regret I had another engagement last night that, I'd be interested in hearing a little more about what it was like off camera. And I think that what we really need to be doing, instead of thinking about what do you like about the high school right now, I think that, when you're planning for a new building, it's an adventure into hopes and dreams, and that's what we really need to be focusing on.
I thought that came out last
Yeah,
night.
That's part of it.
Yeah.
That's part of it, for sure.
So.
Yeah, that was the fourth question.
That was the fourth question.
Yeah.
So, I'm speaking out of total ignorance, but that's sort of the bottom line for me is what the hopes and dreams of the folks are.
I mean, the idea of building the school on Spy Pond with boats and stuff, wasn't it?
Yeah. Didn't come up.
The pool won't go away, though.
Yeah.
Well, take care of the pool if you do postpone.
If you build it on the island in the middle of Spy Pond, you don't need the pool.
Okay. Okay, no, we should be careful. That's just off the. Yeah. Okay.
Oh, sorry, we got the paper here,
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Gibbs Committee, Cindy?
No, we haven't met.
Liaison reports, anyone want to report anything? Any announcements?
I have one.
Yes?
Stratton fourth grade Girl Scouts came to the town hall to ask prepared questions to the town clerk, assessor, treasurer, selectman, town manager, and a school committee member this afternoon. This was a continuation of the mock town meeting. I put us all on notice. We're gonna have some very involved people coming up through the town.
Excellent.
Any future agenda items? Okay. So I think we're now on time.
Yeah, I'm 2 minutes early.
Vote to meet, so now we're gonna, I'm gonna accept a motion to meet in executive session pursuant to Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 21A, Purpose 2, to conduct a strategy session in preparation for negotiations with non-union personnel, superintendent of schools, to conduct strategy sessions in preparation for negotiations with union and/or non-union personnel, or contract negotiations with union and/or non-union, in which if held in an open meeting may have a detrimental effect. To conduct strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation, in which if held in an open meeting may have a detrimental effect. Collective bargaining may also be conducted. Motion to meet in executive session pursuant to Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 21A, Purpose 2, to conduct a strategy session. That's repeatable, that's above, okay. To conduct a strategy session in preparation for negotiations with non-union personnel, specifically the superintendent of schools.
So move.
Motion? We're gonna take, a second, please?
Second.
Second. Roll call.
Yes?
Yes.
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 Aye.
Yes. Okay, we're not gonna adjourn, we're not gonna come back, so we're not gonna come back,
I just have to run. Who's our privilege?
you should do what you need to do, we'll take a little
Just
break.
run.
And we'll see you soon. Thank you.